Hey guys, we're just trying to get everybody back at the board table. Should start in just a minute.
All right, welcome back. I'd like to call this meeting back to order. What's the first thing on the list?
First up, we've got Turner had a couple of updates from the support group for us. We got a couple people asking for just a change in their status. It's under tab 5. Turner?
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I will bring Jonathan Lott up. Jonathan Lott is currently a student. He signed his preliminary consent order with the board on April 1st, 2022. He signed his Arkansas Pharmacy Support Group contract on June 14th of 2022. He did his treatment at Palmetto, went through treatment fine. Great reports from Palmetto. He has been involved with the support group since last June. He's had 26 tests, 0 missed check-ins, and all 26 have been negative. At first, Jonathan, was very quiet. I think he was timid getting involved, but now, he's an active member. He attends monthly meetings. His monitor, Dr. Carl Corbell, fully recommends this advocacy. So I'll turn it over to the board.
All right. Any comments, questions, suggestions?
We need to talk to Jonathan. Hey, Jonathan,
Hi, how's it going?
how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for taking the time to fit me in today.
Okay, kind of tell us a little bit about, in your words, as to how you're doing.
I'm doing much better. You know, it's definitely been you know a difficult long year. But honestly, now I feel like I'm definitely in a better place. You know, a lot of that I have to give to the support group. It's nice to have a nice group of supportive people that I can go to. My wife honestly has been a big support. You know, before I went into the support group, I'd only finished 2 rotations in my 4th year. I'm now in my last rotation. You know, I've got nothing but good things that the preceptors have told me. And I feel like I'm in a much better place. I'm doing good.
Okay, have you thought about what area of pharmacy you want to go into?
Yeah. So all of my experience has kind of been in the community pharmacy setting. That's where I worked before. That's kind of what I have the most experience in, and I do really enjoy kind of that close patient interaction. You know, when you've been at a place for a while and you kind of know some of the patients by name, just seeing that you can kind of like see, you know, on their face and all that you're making a difference. And that's something I really enjoy. So that's definitely where I can see myself going afterwards.
And do you have a go-to person to talk to when you get, have some dark days?
Yeah, so I do. Like I said, I've got the support group. Call's been a great support. I've also got a sponsor. His name is John. He's been a great support as well. He's helped me through a lot of just going through the steps. He's been there for me when I've needed him or needed any help. And like I also mentioned, I have a very, very supportive wife who's very understanding and has really helped me through a lot of the stress and everything that's gone with this. I've also got a therapist that I see pretty regularly, and she helps me through a lot of that too.
Okay, that's good to hear. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Jonathan, you ready for your Naplex?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to spend some more time studying for sure. But I'm excited. That pre-Naplex I took in January definitely I passed it. It scared me though. I'll be honest. A lot of infectious disease and oncology questions, so I definitely need to brush up there. But yes, I'm definitely looking forward to taking the test.
And I think, really the request for Jonathan is to be able to convert to probationary or to be able to take Naplex, but that would also be to allow him to get his license as a pharmacist, not just an intern. So just want to be sure the board knew it's kind of a twofold request. We don't expect him to come back and say, well, I passed Naplex now I want approval to be a pharmacist. So I would ask that you consider that as a overall potential motion. Anybody else have any questions for him? No, sir. Motion?
We have a motion.
Motion to approve the request and allow him to take the Naplex and be eligible for licensure based on his passing score.
I second that motion.
All right, so we have a motion to allow him to take his Naplex. And second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Okay. Real quick, Turner, I think we had already approved Jonathan for full-time previously as an intern, hadn't we?
Yes.
So I think we would just transfer over that he's eligible to work full-time, whether it's as a pharmacist or an intern at that point. So I'll just take that as a, correlating it over to that.
Okay. So what this means, Jonathan, is that you don't have to go through coming back to the board to get, advocacy to work 20 hours, then 32 hours, then 40 hours. Once they've approved you, you pass the Naplex and you're fully licensed, you can go to work full time. That's correct, isn't it, Dr. Kirtley?
Yes.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for the clarification.
Dr. McCready caught that, not me, so I give her the credit.
Well, I had told him the direct opposite, to be honest. I had said that he would have to come back and ask for advocacy for 20 hours and 32 hours and 40 hours. So thank you, Dr. McCready.
Yeah, thank you
Good
very
luck.
much.
Good
I
luck on the
appreciate it.
test.
Thank you.
All right, so next on the list is Julie. And let me bring up her. Sedlacek. And she was here the last meeting to get to work for 20 hours per week. She just went before the executive committee this past Sunday to get advocacy to work for 32 hours. They unanimously approved this. Since her last meeting with the board, she's had 0 missed check-ins. She's had 6 tests. 1 have been dilute, 5 negative. The one that she took right after the dilute was negative. She's very active in the support group. A support group monitor, Dr. Jennifer Kelly's on the Zoom call. Also, she fully supports this advocacy, and I'll turn it over to the board.
Julie, just let us know where you've been working and how it's going.
Okay, so hi, I've been working in Hazen with my monitor, Jennifer Kelly, and it's been going great. It's really good. She's got a great store.
Hey, I'll add something into this too. She's been doing the commute and also having to stay in a hotel to do this job because she wants to get back into the profession so bad. The reports from her monitor, Jennifer Kelly, is that she did an exceptional job. It was a pleasure to work with.
Anything else you guys want to hear? Her request is to move up to 32 hours a week.
Anybody have anything?
Motion to approve the request to allow her to work 32 hours a week.
We have a motion. Second,
I'll second.
got a second? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it.
All right. Anything else you guys need, Turner?
Nope, I think that's it for this time.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for joining us today and hope you have a great day.
Hey, and thank y'all for getting us in so quick.
Absolutely. Glad to.
I
Yeah, thank
appreciate
you
it.
for having us.
All right. So next up, I was just passing down tests for you guys to look at. Corinthian, you want to come up? It says, I would prefer not to, but if you have a seat at any of those, and if you will press, there's a push button on there. If you press it and release, it'll turn green for go. Hit press it. There you go. So I know you guys are going to hear from Corinthian. My favorite question in any interviews you guys know very well is, who are you, where you're from, where are you in school, and why are you here today? She is here today to request the ability to take another jurisprudence exam from us. I'll let Corinthian tell you who she is and where she's from.
My name is Corinthian Hawkins. I'm from everywhere. I just moved here. I go to Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska.
She's in the online pharmacy PharmD program with Creighton and is living here locally and getting ready to do her APPE rotations. So she's been an intern, but for APP rotations, she has to pass our jurisprudence exam. So she took it last week and then Monday, and at that point, she has to talk to you guys for approval to go any further.
So you're going to school online?
We have to go there during the summer for labs every year and for exams.
So you're a resident of Arkansas?
Yes, ma'am, I just moved here.
Okay, but what do you mean when you said you were from everywhere? Give us a little bit on that background.
Navy veteran.
Okay.
How long you been in Arkansas now?
I've been here for a year and a few months.
Okay. And how long have you worked in pharmacy here
In Arkansas,
in Arkansas?
the same amount of time.
Okay. You've worked in pharmacies in what other states?
Florida, Hawaii, a little bit in Nebraska as well. In Tennessee.
Yeah, she wasn't exaggerating.
Okay.
So what do you think, what about the test or what about it that's keeping you from passing?
Confusing. All the state laws that I've just learned in my law class and at Creighton, and it was Nebraska law heavy. Confusing Tennessee laws, confusing Hawaii laws, confusing Florida laws, like meshing them together, and nerves.
Yeah.
I went over the book again, and my preceptor shared a website that allows you to take practice exams. So I worked on that last night. So. Actually, I was supposed to start Monday, but yes, sir. I was in Omaha doing my labs there, so I wasn't able to come here over the summer to take the exam. As soon as possible. Am I ready? I sure hope so.
Let's say you took it Monday and
Last Friday.
last Friday.
I could use a day to utilize the online program again, the practice test.
And I would, having even talked to the folks at Creighton, I have kind of given the warning of, I know there's a lot of MPJE study test styled out there. I know that at least one of our preceptors is licensed in several states. And I explained that our test is not an MPJE or an MPJE-like test because of the types of questions that we ask. Of course, Corinthian has seen two versions of our test and I think that is as reflective of anything of the types of questions we're going to ask, because we are fairly, consistent in the way we ask questions and the types of the areas that we're asking questions about. We don't say, well, now it's test 3, so we're going to go pull 20% more of federal law. It's still the same mix of information that we're testing on.
Advice? Yes, ma'am.
So the
Oh,
review,
the
she's
review
reviewed.
too. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
We got our printed law book so she could go along and highlight and everything as well.
First. I would make note of that.
I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Our questions are not just interpretation of the information. Scenarios, so to speak. I'll be brief, and then ask you to apply that information.
Yes, sir.
Let me give you some tips. True false question. The four corners of that question. What if, or maybe that. Find yourself doing that on just about. Read that question again and just. What is the question? If you find that you're not quite sure, put which answer you've narrowed it down. You're still not sure. Back to it and keep coming. Do not answer that question until you are ready to make a final. To answer it, then you have the psychological tendency to want. Leave it open, then every answer is still fair game. You're not going to predict your life. You've answered it. Answer it, leave it alone. A-type question. A-type question, you know.
No.
For the type of questions where you'll have a question and then it'll answer the answer. Too strong is. For those types of questions, just read the question. Of the answers that are listed, which ones fulfill that question? Is it negative? I'm asking a series of true false questions. Then you just check which ones apply and then go and answer.
Yes, sir.
Those are some things that. Also, too, if you. How you fill out the answer. As you go, then you're cognizant that you. Question the first unit come back.
Yes, sir.
Please listen to Dr. Curtin. Can help weed out the things that you think.
Yes, sir.
And then just pay.
Yes.
She's probably tired of hearing my voice on that review at this point, so.
So what do you think? It's a good time to wait before.
So we generally have a 2-week wait out period between round 1 and round 2. And understanding the position that she was in with the rotation that was going to start, I reached out to board president to see if I could waive it. And I mean, of course, Lynn's immediate answer was, hey, we need to help her out. Let's, if she thinks she's ready, we'll let her do round 2. I've warned her that oftentimes at some point the board is going to say we want some gap of time to study. That's why we usually do that initial wait out on round 1. And then we oftentimes have a gap between anyone that has a round 2 before they can even meet with the board. So the other thing was, well, by us moving her up to Monday, it was a just in case anything happens. It meant she could come today and not have to wait until August potentially to get approval for the next round. So we've compressed her time right now, which, could be beneficial, could have actually hurt her because it's a lot of pressure real quick that way. You guys do not let us show failed test anyone. I don't believe I told her score. I did give her, I went over her entire test and gave her specifics to focus on where I thought she was struggling. So I can show her scores. Okay. Do that.
think if she maybe take it at the end of this week. Yeah. Move on from that. Right. How many rotations do you have to do?
9. Actually, I'm not quite sure, because we have to find the locations ourselves for the rotations, and the school pretty much coordinates the dates. So I have the date for this coming up one, and I believe the next one I possibly get 1 to 2 weeks off and then go back to the second rotation.
So you do 9 5-week rotations.
Yes, sir.
So theirs isn't, many schools, it's a month block or a 6-week block and you're either on or off. What it sounds like is theirs is 5 weeks, but she may have a week or two between certain rotations. So this one and the next one, you've got 2 weeks.
I believe so.
So theoretically, if she took 2 weeks off and they could work it out, she might still be able to do that first rotation, just delay it by 2 weeks and not have a gap between the two. Now that you may have other life plans for those 2 weeks, but I know for a lot of us, it's you end a rotation one day and start another one the next when it's calendar based.
I don't have a problem with that.
Let's, what do you feel like you had significant?
It's going to be August, September before you meet again. And I keep getting reminders we need to turn your mics on.
So I think that we're good with her taking the test again. It's just a matter of when.
So if it's 2 weeks from test 1, that would be next Friday at the soonest. But then say the window's open for her after next, starting next Friday or whenever after. But the reminder is you need to be prepared for this test. And I can show her results on round 1 and round 2, so she's aware of it.
Certainly think that's fair. Do you need a motion?
That would be great.
Do we have a motion? Amy?
I make a motion that we allow her to take the test for the 3rd time, 2 weeks from the first date of her original test.
We have a motion. Is there a second? We have a motion to allow her to take the test 2 weeks from the date of her first test. Seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No opposed. Ayes have it.
All right. Thank you.
Good luck.
Good luck.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah.
Mazza.
Start, they've got
Great.
the.
Good afternoon, and thank you again for giving us the opportunity to come to the board to address any of the concerns that you may have regarding Lightning RX. My name is Scott Mazza. I'm a licensed pharmacist in the state of Arkansas for 18 years and a practicing pharmacist for 34 years. And I'm the PIC, the pharmacist in charge for Lightning RX. Today, Philip is going to, as the head of pharmacy operations, is going to address some of the concerns and questions that you may have regarding our operation, and we'll be able to answer any questions that you may have.
Good afternoon. I'm Phil. I'm also a licensed pharmacist, but I oversee the operations of Lightning RX down in South Florida. So the three main concerns were the scope of practice, the referrals from Zip Health, and the patient freedom of choice. So the scope of practice for Lightning RX, we're a mail order pharmacy. We dispense non-controlled medication and non-compounded drugs. So it's just regular medicine going through the mail, nothing like no narcotics or anything like that. We don't want to do any of that stuff. And then we have the referrals from Zip Health, I think is the next best point to go through. So Zip Health is a telemedicine platform that connects patients with physicians, and then the physicians will then review their consultations and then prescribe if appropriate, and then send the prescription over to us for filling. During this process, for each state, they have different regulations. For the state of Arkansas, it is an audiovisual component. So they do a medical intake form, gets their medical history, allergies, drugs that they're current on. That'll be used for the pharmacy to also do DUR checkpoint. But after that, the doctors will do a audiovisual consult that they schedule. And then afterwards, they can confirm whether they want the prescription filled with us or a pharmacy of their choosing. So going into like the patient freedom of choice. So during that consult, they can request it to be sent anywhere. If they don't mind it being filled by Lightning, then we'll take care of it from there. The refills will sit with us, and they can transfer out at any time during the course of their treatment with us. And that's just the gist of the questions. If anything else, just let me know.
That the patient can request, but what's your conversation with the patient? Do you have a pharmacy that you prefer? I mean, do you ask that, or?
So when they do the audiovisual consultation, they'll have a one-on-one with the doctor or nurse practitioner, and they can decide whether it's best to send it to us or a local pharmacy if they need it sooner. So we'll get the referral with the prescription. So it comes with the like their medical history, like the doctor's notes, along with the prescription, and then we will fill and ship directly to patients.
The patients also have access to a toll-free telephone number. They can call the pharmacy directly and have that prescription transferred at their request as well.
So are you, I'm sorry. Are you saying then that the freedom of choice by the patient is exercised before it gets to you? In other words, the patient's already decided to choose you.
The patient has the opportunity to let the physician know at that point, and then it will be transferred out, or during the process, if they decide to change their mind and not have us fill it, once the prescription has been sent to us by the physician, then we could transfer that prescription out to the patient's pharmacy of choice.
Okay, thank you.
Sir.
We have a formulary on the Zip Health website. They offer ED treatments, migraines, herpes, yeast infections, and things like that they will have a consultation with the doctor with. So we just dispense those items.
We are a licensed community pharmacy in the state of Florida, so we're able to fill every prescription that's licensed in a community setting.
But no controls
No control, sir.
No DEA.
for the pharmacy as a whole.
That's correct.
Nope.
So is the pharmacy contracted with Zip Health as a provider of patient medications?
We have,
So-
sorry, I was going to cut you off. Yeah, we have a service agreement that we will fill on there, but like the payment kind of goes through the MSO company, the managed service, like the website. And then if we fill, we bill them for that.
So when the patient comes in or does a telemedicine call with Zip Health
Mhm.
and Dr. ABC decides that I need whatever medication I need, I pay Zip Health for my visit, my medication, everything all at once. And then Zip Health sends it to whomever is going to fill it. So tell me how that doesn't affect patient choice if I tell you that I want to get my prescription filled in Little Rock and I'm not contracted with Zip, the pharmacy's not contracted with Zip Health. So how are they going to be paid for that if Zip Health has already taken that money and the pharmacy here is not contracted with Zip Health?
In that case, they don't charge the patient for that because it'll just be like the consultation fee, not the full price of the medication.
So when we reviewed the application under operations, it says describe the nature of the operation in detail. I think the thing that flagged this was that Lightning RX receives its orders as referrals from independently contracted physicians that are contracted by Zip Health Services Incorporated. Zip Health Services is a managed service organization, an MCO, that manages 2 websites where patients may complete telemedicine visits. Then it lists the 2 websites. The pharmacy does not manage the website, but does accept referrals to fill prescriptions from the prescribers that treat patients on these platforms. So I don't know where the Zip Health comes in and what benefit it would be to them for them to take a patient that's not going through their process where they're collecting all the money and then just, do they contract pricing with you for what your prescriptions are going to cost? So I, as a pharmacist in Arkansas, won't have a contract, so the pricing is going to be different than what they contract through you, I would presume.
Yeah, so in that case, it'll just be the consultation fee. They don't charge, they'll like refund the cost of medication because they're not charging for medication. So when you pay initially, it's like you paying for both the cost of the medicine and the consultation. But if the patient opts to not get it filled with us, then they reimburse them the
Is
cost of
that
it.
reimbursement instantaneous?
They just process.
7 day, we'll send it back to you whenever and.
Well, he would have no control over that part.
Yeah.
That's my point.
So how do you, if you're required to contact the patient or caregiver for approval prior to any billing or delivery, then are you only calling them about the delivery?
Yeah, we just contact them, if there's any issues or like after DUR, if there's any drug interactions, and then we ship out the medication.
So if they're on therapy and you're not going to be able to get it to them in a timely manner to continue whatever therapy they're on, what's your plan for the local supplies required by Rule 7?
In that case, we could just transfer immediate to a local pharmacy. We do ship overnight with FedEx Express. So most packages do go overnight, but just in case if there's ever emergency, I know sometimes we have patients who get the like fluconazole and stuff, they need it immediately. We'll just call it in.
So you would pay the local pharmacy to fulfill it for them?
No, we don't handle any of we just transfer the prescription over and the payment is with the patient and that pharmacy.
That's not the way that Rule 7 reads, though. You have to have a plan in place for local medication supply availability when delivery cannot be accomplished in a timely manner to maintain the patient's ongoing therapy. So if you figure that out with the patient, that's one thing.
Mhm.
But the patient says, I've already paid for this, now you've been paid for it, then it's really on you to get them their drugs that they've agreed to use you for. So just as a warning.
But we're actually refunding that portion of that
Well, but
back to the patient.
It would be the other people potentially refunding it, wouldn't it? Or do you have a control over that?
We just let them know.
We let them know, and then at that point, the MSO would then give the immediate refund then to the patient.
So they do have some control over it, Dr. McCready.
And in addition to that, under describe how the pharmacy will comply with regulation 09-00001, patient counseling. For the patient counseling, patients that are mailed their prescriptions from Lightning RX receive a patient information leaflet generated by Lightning RX. The leaflet contains relevant information regarding indication, proper dosing, storage, and side effects. If the patient has further question regarding the treatment, there is a contact number to reach the pharmacy and can speak directly with the pharmacist. For the patient profile, Lightning RX receives information regarding patient personal information such as name, address, etc., which doesn't appear to meet the counseling requirements in Arkansas either.
We utilize the USPDI information to create through a health literacy approach, our documentation for patient counseling. So that information in that leaflet is generated actually at a 5th grade reading level. Health literacy for that patient to understand that information. We offer the counseling with a 1-800 number. In addition to that, similar to what other mail order pharmacies provide. If in fact that we believe the pharmacists believe that there's a drug interaction or is some concern, then we actually do an outreach then directly to the patient in that effect.
I think what she's saying is you have to proactively counsel the patient, and you're saying you make arrangements for when you're shipping to them. For Arkansas, you have to counsel them and get their approval to ship it before you can bill it or ship it, not necessarily just a number they can contact you at. And that's a newer, well, the requirement that you shall counsel has been around for decades, but the other rule came about last year about shipping meds, so the very end of Rule 7.
So my question kind of goes with that. Somebody has already signed up saying they picked your pharmacy, so it's all comes to you and you're shipping it. Do you ever contact that patient, or you just straight out ship it just because they've already signed up for it?
Currently, the process is to do that, but we can modify it for Arkansas rules or regulations because it's a newer rule that some of the other states don't have. So we aren't currently in our policies and procedures, but we can modify it to certainly reach out to every patient prior to call.
If I could ask the board a question, then in that respect, is there the opportunity then for that physician when they're doing the audio visual counseling at that point and making that determination to address that particular counseling portion?
Are they licensed as the pharmacy shipping?
No.
And they could not do that. It's a requirement on the pharmacy.
Okay.
It's literally the last section of Rule 7. And it's, if you're providing home delivery services in Arkansas, you shall contact the patient or caregiver for approval prior to any billing or delivery of medications. Notify the patient of the delivery plan and expected arrival. Ensure the medication will be maintained within appropriate temperature guidelines. Arrange for any controlled substance, doesn't apply to you, to require proof of delivery. Have a plan in place for local medication supply availability. When delivery cannot be accomplished in a timely manner, maintain the patient's ongoing therapy. There's a secondary paragraph that if you are owned or controlled by or under ownership of an insurance company, PBM, manufacturer, wholesaler, or some other people, you actually have to let the patients know that as well.
I assume that money moves between Zip Health and Lightning when Zip Health pays you for a prescription that you filled, right?
Yes, sir.
Are there any other circumstances where money moves from Zip Health to Lightning?
No, nothing I'm aware of. No, sir.
Are there any circumstances where monies move from Lightning to Zip Health?
Not unless there's like a refund or
For a refund.
disputes
Yes.
on the.
Other than refunds, are there any situations?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
There's no membership fee or anything that Zip Health charges you to participate in the program.
No.
The different business model for staff, which is why we asked them to come in. So it would be up to the board whether or not to approve their application.
Yeah, and as the person that normally sees these and runs them up the chain, I think it would be important for them to let us know how they're gonna meet these requirements prior to issuing a license, but that's just.
Added as an addendum to their application.
So if I could address the board in that manner, if we were to possibly obtain a conditional approval with the provision of meeting these requirements, would that suffice?
I think what she's saying is just answering those questions in writing to have added to your application so that way, if there was ever an issue, we would have that in writing from you guys.
It's a fair assessment.
Not asking you to come back or anything like that.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
just
We,
in and then giving staff the authority to approve it once.
fair enough. We could put together a guideline and SOP regarding that process. That will adhere to the actual regulation.
One of my concerns, and I know I asked you earlier about this in a roundabout way, but I'm going to ask it a little bit differently. Is, I think of patient freedom of choice as opt-in versus opt-out. Do I have to intervene? Because when I go to my physician's office, I get asked, what pharmacy do you like to use? That to me is freedom of choice. And I'm just giving you my opinion. I don't know what the law says, and I'll certainly take correction on this if I'm misinterpreting. It almost sounds to me like unless the patient intervenes and says, no, I don't, you guys actually aren't really offering them a choice. You're automatic, that prescription is automatically going from Zip Health to Lightning. And I have to vocally intervene and say, no, I don't want to use that. I want to use my local pharmacy. And I interpret that a little bit differently as a board member as far as freedom of choice. So am I misinterpreting that?
No, and I understand. I appreciate what you're saying. Patients typically come to us for the discreteness of many of the medications, especially in the area of ED. You're absolutely correct. I mean, patients, typically it's an opt-out process at that point. So they've made the determination typically on the forefront that they wanted to use us from the beginning. If they change their mind at any point in the process, that's up to them to vocalize that. And you're right. But then they would opt out at that point, and then we'd make the provisions immediately for their transfer.
I feel like there's a little bit of interpretation that's going on there, though, on your side, because just because they want to use a telehealth visit, they may be as uncomfortable going into their doctor's office and want to have that. That doesn't necessarily, I understand what you're saying about the pharmacy filling too,
Right.
but you're, to me, that's kind of making a presumption. And I just feel like I need to ask more about that and make sure that they truly have freedom of choice and they're not unaware of their choice and things aren't automatically going to yours, to your pharmacy. So when you respond back in writing, I would like to see some assurances that's occurring.
And that can actually be interjected into the counseling section, even at the physician level as well. So it's
I think it would have to be. Yeah, I mean, you've got a
Right.
business relationship
correct.
with this.
Correct.
And normally, Dr. Kirtley can correct me if I'm wrong, we wouldn't have any purview over a physician office and what they say or don't say in their
Correct.
office. But I think it's by virtue of the fact that you guys have a relationship that I'm pressing the point a little bit. So
No, well taken, and that can actually be addressed as well.
Yeah, I was also going to say during the initial part of the provision, we're supposed to put together the policy about contacting the patient before we fill it. We can also use that as a point to double check that they confirmed they want us to fill it. We can put that into the policy when we send the amendment.
okay, thank you.
Anyone else? And a motion? Do you have anyone that's willing to make a motion?
So I would, for discussion, I think if I were to make a motion right now, it would be that they provide back those addendums to the application. And then I guess my question for you guys or maybe for Dr. Curley or Dr. McCready to weigh in is would our motion be for them to, we're okay with them approving as long as they review and they feel like all the requirements of scope of practice, patient freedom of choice have been met? Okay, so I'll make that motion.
All right. Repeat your motion for me.
I'll tell what I understand is that it is approvable once they answer those addendums to answer the questions on freedom of choice, patient counseling, and really their shipment model. I'm sorry?
In writing.
In writing, yes, yes.
So moved.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yes. Yeah, Booth went up next. Dr. McCready? Yeah.
Just so we do it. Is that right?
Go ahead again.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Okay, I'm good with it.
So Dr. McCready, I believe this is, we had an application that had an administrative denial, and at this point, rather than an administrative denial with appeal to hearing, we have a request just to withdraw. Is that correct?
That is correct.
In a nutshell?
In a nutshell.
There you go.
The application.
Yeah, the application so that it would not have a resultant denial of any type on it.
All right.
Go back and regroup.
So do they need an action on us if she's doing that?
Well, yes, because we had administrative denial, it's either they could appeal for a hearing or the administrative denial would stand, which would be seen as some as disciplinary action. They do not want to have disciplinary action, would prefer just to withdraw their application, regroup, and potentially apply again in the future, or just.
Right. But you don't need us for that, do you?
We do need a motion for you guys to accept them withdrawing rather than pushing it to a hearing.
It sort of reverses the
Yeah,
administrative.
it reverses our administrative denial so that they don't have disciplinary issues with us. Go ahead.
Okay, I would like to make a motion in the matter of Boothwyn Pharmacy, case number 2023-054, that we accept their withdrawal of applications.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. All right.
Thank you very much.
You.
Don't go anywhere yet.
I'm not done,
Oh.
just with that one.
Madam Chair.
Um,
That's
No.
just
I don't think so.
the warm-up act.
Nope.
Boylan.
Boylan.
I think she's out here.
Brad, who else you bring with you today?
Students this month, so Brandon was kind enough to share some knowledge with them yesterday, and we're excited to bring them today.
Did you tell them they get to take the law test again while they're here?
It's great to have so
We
many.
encourage them to be.
He wants to encourage them to be pharmacists. I actually got to see it yesterday. She said, do not endorse taking the law test a second time.
I was gonna say, it's great to have so many students here today. I don't know that.
Yeah.
There's four, is it four?
Rodney used to bring his whole
That's great.
class.
That's what it takes.
So Brad, you've got one from Harding and one from UMS, is that right?
Welcome. CE, they don't have to have CE, they're students. We haven't done that in a number of years. We haven't had anybody ask us ahead of time for it even as of late. Plus, since we do so much online, when we first started going online, people were like, can I just get CE for watching it? We're like, no, that's not how it works either. Like it's, because it's not going to go into CPE monitor or any other auditable database. It wasn't always necessarily helpful. You ready? All right. So if you want to tell us who you have with us, I'll go over the informal procedure real quick, which I know you've heard about 1,000 times from me.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. This is Dr. Leslyn Boylan.
Okay.
She a little bit nervous, but that's okay. Yeah.
We get that a lot. I'm John Kirtley. I'm the director of the Board of Pharmacy, and I like to oftentimes explain real briefly how the informal conference process works. Although you're with the full board today, we're using this as an opportunity much like mediation or something instead of a full hearing where we try to have a frank conversation back and forth across the table about why we're here. The real important parts for you is at the end of this discussion, the board members are going to suggest some type of action. And whatever they suggest, you could either agree with or disagree with. If you agree with it, then we go forth with whatever they have asked us to do or suggested. If you disagree with it, it's not something you have to sit right here today and tell us immediately. It's something you can go back and meet with counsel once we reduce whatever to writing and then think about it. If you disagree, then you could request a full formal hearing at a later date. Formal hearing is going to be the same 8 board members, a hearing officer, a court reporter. We swear everybody in. It looks a little more formal like going to court. So it might be something that makes you more nervous, but it's kind of the same group that you would see today. And I always ask, do you have any questions about how the process works before we get started?
I don't think so.
The other thing with this, at any point, if you need to have a sidebar with your counsel, if you need to ask us a clarifying question or whatever that may be, let us know. I know you've never been in that seat and we've done this a lot, so it's a little bit of a foreign concept for you. And Dr. McCready just walked out. Oh, there's the form to participate in informal conference.
Oh.
Which I'm anticipating there's not a problem with. But so for Dr. Boylan, you guys have under tab 9, the board members have just been given on the tablets availability to look at the same information. We do have an order notice of hearing in case we needed a full hearing, and it has some notes and allegations about I would say an alleged med error or a failure to counsel that was claimed by a complainant. But it's not necessarily there was a med error, it was more of a failure to feel something. I just told her. Yeah. Yeah.
A prescription that was not filled.
A prescription that was not filled.
Yes.
Which is odd.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Dr. McCray, you want to give me another description of why we're here? Is a prescription that was not filled based on a patient complaint. And in part, the patient complained, specifically naming Dr. Boylan, that had he been counseled on the prescription that was filled, that would have been counseled on, that there would have been a realization that a second prescription that was needed was not included and therefore would have identified at that time to try to get the full therapy they needed. And you guys can read the complaint.
And there's an order notice of hearing. I can summarize real quick and then Dr. McCready wants to present a couple of points. Basically on June 24th, 2022, longtime patient of the Walgreens there presented 2 prescriptions. One was for fluticasone and the other one was for Paxlovid, who is experiencing COVID symptoms. The prescription for Paxlovid is under tab 14. That's the one prescription that did not get filled. There was a conversation by the patient, I believe with the tech, that said they couldn't fill his prescription, they were closing, and they wouldn't be open until the following Monday. The patient told them that he needed his prescription. Could they transfer it to a 24/7 Walgreens? And then according to our patient, responded Boylan then agreed to fill the prescriptions. And she was the pharmacist that dealt with him, and only the fluticasone was filled and not the Paxlovid. There is an indication in the records that being a new prescription, that the patient was not provided any counseling through the drive-through. And the patient discovered this error, an omission of filling the Paxlovid later, when he confirmed with his treating physician the next day that he did, in fact, the physician wrote a prescription for Paxlovid, and obviously the patient didn't get it. That would have been somewhat helpful if he was experiencing COVID symptoms to get that prescription in a timely manner. This case is really driven by documents and records, so I've done it in a exhibit. And some of these I'm going to outline for you, and others Dr. McCready is going to outline for you. The first one I want to look at is exhibit number 7.
And that's on that, which one is that?
It's a
That is on-
from Walgreens.
Can you put it on the screen? Because I don't know what you're,
That's on page 11 of your tablet.
thank you. I don't have any numbers on any of them.
So that prescription, that's the receipt. And it shows that the transaction took place at 5:38 PM on June 24th, 2022. And the timeframes are important in this case. It's going to be Dr. Boylan's contention that it was not her that did this transaction. In fact, it was her coworker. After reviewing this investigation and the records that were presented to us, obviously, we think Ms. Boylan is responsible. The patient identified Ms. Boylan as the pharmacist that took care of him. And so that is why we brought her in for an informal. The issue on some of this is logbook. The coworker of Ms. Boylan didn't sign in at all that day. And Ms. Boylan was signed in until 7 PM. We do believe that her coworker was there because according to the transaction reports for that day, which is under tab 19, voluminous, but he did obviously work on some prescriptions that day.
And those are on like page 15, 16, 17 of your book. And you'll see that his initials there are JCT. He was the other pharmacist that was there on scheduled 9 to 5 that day. Sorry.
No, you're good. And then exhibit number 10 is also the transaction report that shows the transaction took place at 5:38. And according to the records that were presented to us, the time records show that JCT was not at work after 5 PM. So, and I think Ms. G and Ms. Boylan are going to dispute that, but based on the records that we've presented or that we were presented and now we're presenting to you, that is what we wanted to present to the board and find that Ms. Boylan was the responsible pharmacist. And I'm going to let Dr. McCready point out some of the exhibits that reflect that.
So when you go back to the transaction records, and you can look just, for example, on page 17 in your tablet, there's the fluticasone there. It shows the patient data reviewed by JCT and the data reviewed. You can go forward on and you can look on page 18. It actually shows that the product was reviewed, but if you look under consulting RX, there are no initials there because they are saying that counseling was refused by the patient. Counseling shall be conducted on all new prescriptions. The patient doesn't have the authority to deny being counseled. You have the prescriptions in your hand. You, by Arkansas law, shall counsel patients.
Excuse me, Dr. McCready, I'm sorry to interrupt you. What page are you referring
That's
to?
on page 18.
The numbers are really, really small.
Aha, okay, we're way off. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Becky.
Okay.
So everybody caught up?
Yes, ma'am.
So the board asked for payroll records from Walgreens to find out who was where at the time. The payroll records indicate that Dr. Boylan was paid until 7 o'clock. They indicate that JCT was paid from 9 until 5. There was a phone call that took place with Dr. Kirtley and Dr. Boylan. I was in the room at the time. The discussion was what happened. And we asked her at that time when the other pharmacist left, and she said 5:30. At this point now, that is sort of being disputed that maybe he was still there. The product was sold at 5:38. However, our documents, the complainant specifically named Dr. Boylan, and that's why we brought her in. Just as a side note, regardless of who was there at 5:38, even if both pharmacists were there, the patient was not counseled on this medication. And had he been counseled, the other medication would have been filled. He was adamant in the drive-through line at 2 o'clock when they closed early that he needed his medications. And they said, come around, come inside, we will get them for you. So that's basically, it's very complicated, it's very convoluted, but all of the board information indicates that from the phone call with Dr. Kirtley to the documents that we have, that Dr. Boylan was actually, should have been the counseling pharmacist.
Was the second one ever filled that day around that same time frame?
It was not that filled that day. I believe they were electronically sent in. And they don't have any documentation for the Paxlovid prescription because it was put on hold and never filled. So they don't have any, they can't send us an audit trail for that because they don't have one. And I don't know. Oh, and the only other thing that, when we see a document that has an audit trail, normally what we see when it says the RPH of record, which is on page 19 of the documents, shows the RPH that did the final verification process. And then there is another record that shows who counseled. And as I said, that's empty because nobody counts.
Brad, is that not correct on the Walgreens system?
We're going to address it
Yeah.
when it's our turn.
And there was some question, and they can explain something about their time clock was off or the timing on their system was incorrect. When you have a document in front of you, if it's on paper, that's what we go with. And so that's why the board is where we are today.
I have a question, if I may, for either Dr. McCready or counsel. Do you know if I guess you wouldn't know if the patient was aware if they had more than one prescription, but did the patient end up, I guess, having full-blown COVID?
That I do not know. I know that he was exposed to COVID and thought he might have some symptoms, but I don't know whether he came out with full-blown COVID or not. I don't know. The complaint is, if you look at your tablet,
Page 8.
is page 8, I think.
8?
Page 8 is the patient's, is the complaint that we received where it says name of the pharmacist, Leslie Boylan, technician unknown, Walgreens, and then it talks about what happened. He did feel like maybe he didn't get the COVID medication because they had some adverse feeling about filling the Paxlovid. But that's not been addressed.
I have a question in looking at A 3 in the allegations. It says I'm sorry. The patient needed the medication and asked the Paxlovid to be transferred to a 24/7 Walgreens. Did that happen?
That did not happen. When he asked that, they told him to pull around to the front and come in and they would fill the medication.
Maybe I'm missing something, but why was one filled but the other one put on hold?
I don't know. Maybe they will address that. I don't know.
Any other questions?
Ready for us? Okay. I'd like to just address a couple of things about the documents, and then, of course, I'm sure you'd like to hear from Dr. Boylan, but in the complaint form, as Dr. McCready has pointed out to you on page 8, it lists Dr. Boylan's full name, her license number, but it does, in the narrative, it doesn't say anything about her specifically. I would like to suggest that y'all that was obtained by calling the pharmacy and saying who was working there that day, as opposed to actually having an interaction with Dr. Boylan. But more importantly, I would like to ask you to turn to the Audit Board of Pharmacy Inspection Report, which I know is in here, but I'm just not sure what page. Do you happen to know, Ashley, what page it would be on? I'll find it.
Let me look at is that exhibit 19?
Yeah, exhibit 9.
This page is what I'm looking for.
Okay, hold on. That is gonna be under tab E, and it's page 214.
So it won't be that on this.
214?
That's her
No,
numbers.
it's not.
Yeah, I don't.
It's not
Further
that
back?
exhibit.
Oh,
Further up.
okay.
Yeah, it's like the last group of documents.
Sorry, y'all, the packet I have is a little bit different than this one, so.
Well, it looks different on the screen, on the tablet than it does in.
Hard tapping in the number.
Does it read the text?
Yeah, what are we
It's
looking
under
for?
tab 20, exhibit 20,
I'm almost there.
19, but it's forever.
Yeah, exhibit 19 is quite large.
Mhm.
For us, exhibit 20, bigger is.
Sorry, 21.
Okay. Which is on,
15. Number 213, page 215.
So what page on this thing do I need to go to?
page
215? Oh, I just found it.
13.
Thank you. 211, you said?
14. Oh, mine, okay, mine says
The very last page.
I don't have a 219.
You do.
Oh, it's in there.
It says, no.
That's a dirty bit.
For
of cheating.
me, it appears to be the very, very last page.
Of course.
Of course it is.
No one that's page 216, 4 pages above it.
It's the same.
Is it the same?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, here we are.
All right, so this is titled up the top, Audit Board of Pharmacy Inspection Report. And this is a report that Walgreens creates for purposes like this, to be able, I mean, you've seen them all before a million times, I'm sure, but to be able to break down who did what in a specific prescription. So if you go to fill history, which is on the bottom left, you can see here, product review by J.C. Taylor, 1631. Consultation documentation completed by J.C. Taylor on 1638. And as Dr. McCready noted, it says this consultation was not accepted. And the RPH of record is J.C. Taylor. So we're definitely not disputing that Dr. Taylor, who is not here today, did not sign the logbook that day. And when he filled out the payroll records for that day, he indicated he left at 5 o'clock. But the audit record for this particular prescription does show that the sale for the prescription that accompanied the Paxlovid prescription was completed by Dr. Taylor. So the records are not as clear as we would like them to be, certainly in order to figure out who did what, but for the closest we can get, I would suggest is the prescription that went along with the Paxlovid prescription. And I think the records are pretty clear of what Dr. Taylor's involvement was with that. In addition to that, the exhibit, I think it was 19 is the really, really long one. That is all of the transactions for that day and the format they're in made it 8 zillion pages. But we can break down the specific prescription for the accompanying one. And I can find the page for you here. I'm not sure what page it would be on for yours, but it shows the initials out to the left are also JCT. So we think at the very least, there is some assumptions being made that Dr. Boylan was the person who did not fill the prescription in this case. And there's also, taking the complainant's word for what happened. And so now I think it's Dr. Boylan's opportunity to tell you what she recalls of what happened in this incident, and y'all can determine what you think happened.
Is the timestamp correct or is it wrong? I thought we understood that 1638 is actually 5 or 1630, whatever is actually 5:30.
That's where we got into Central Standard Time versus daylight.
This is Central Standard, not daylight saving. Correct. So that 1638 is actually 5:38.
No.
Non-military daylight saving time.
Believe so, but either way, that doesn't affect whose name was on there.
But that's my follow-up is when counseling is refused now, and I may understand this wrong, is it a pharmacist only that can check that off under the login, or can text notate that point of sale?
I don't believe that's changed since the last case where we talked about that. It was the question that came up on the screen at checkout for the drive-through said, do they want to talk to a pharmacist? And if they say no, if the technician said no, which is generally what would happen, then it would say counseling was refused, regardless of what interaction actually happened between the pharmacist and the patient.
But I thought they came in, didn't they send them from the drive-through to inside to fill it?
I'm actually not sure about that.
I don't think that's technical. But I guess what I'm trying to figure out is it says it has RPH of record. That's different than the product review. The product review is that. That if you log in, the technician can check off yes or no, but it attaches to whoever you were signed.
I don't know the answer to that.
Yes, and so there's the same prompt at the drive-through or up front, is that the register that they can trying to address that aligned with the field on what that means. But the pharmacist of record does not indicate that the person that did the product review or the person that did the consultation, that just a pharmacist that's.
I don't think it says.
Doesn't mean that that's a pharmacist.
Pharmacist of record, correct. Yeah, it's just an internal indication.
I walk out of the store at 5 o'clock or 5:15.
It's the policy of the Walgreens that the pharmacists are responsible for themselves, not to prevent other people.
But you're also supposed to sign.
Yeah. I don't believe it says on here, or at least if it does, I can't find it, whether it was picked up inside or in the drive-through. The complaint form said, told me to pull around and they would fill it. Didn't say to come in.
That may be true.
But I don't think I know the answer to that, but that's what we do have available here. But, did you have any other questions, Dr. Curley? Okay.
I've got a quick process question. When a prescription is e-prescribed into the system, does the system immediately put it on hold, or is there another kind of queue that holds them until somebody has to take an action to either fill it or put it on hold? So kind of the root of that question is, if even though we don't have documentation because the one prescription wasn't filled, do we have any sort of timestamp in the system of somebody actively putting it on hold? Or where did it end up? Because I think somebody said it was on hold somewhere.
My understanding is that there was not a trail for that prescription that is available because it was not filled. Beyond that, in the regular processes, I don't know if you can speak to her question.
But it is not automatically on hold. That has to be completed by the pharmacy on that verification.
Do we know if they were out of it that day? I mean, why else would it go on hold unless they didn't have any, or, you know, you talk to the patient, they said, I don't want it today, but it seems like there would be some action.
Can Dr. Boylan tell you what she remembers of that? Okay.
Okay. So I really don't remember anything about this. I just know that the pharmacist that normally works there called me probably a couple of weeks later asking if I remembered anything about it. And I said I didn't remember anything about a Paxlovid prescription. If I would have known about it, I would have filled it as soon as I could. Then he sent me the complaint form, which on that it just says pharmacist. It doesn't say male, female, name or anything. I think that he told them who was on duty at that time for the complaint. But I don't remember anything about it. I do know that if there's like a rejection or something, like I know Paxlovid was coming in probably around that time, like very new to Walgreens, like we were just either starting to get it or hadn't gotten it yet. But I know from working at another place that we got it in, it might've been the week before or after that. And I remember checking on how to do it and all that kind of stuff because it was new to that pharmacy that I was working at. So it was either fairly new or they may not have had it. I don't know because I'm not sure because I don't remember anything about the Paxlovid there. The reason why it got stored, I'm just speculating, but it could have been a rejection if it was on their insurance. And the techs usually put in the prescriptions just because they Walgreens wants several eyes to be on a prescription. So they don't like the pharmacists usually to do it. They're the only one there. But even if we have two, sometimes the tech's the first one to get to the prescriptions. And if something happened, it could have gotten into a rejection. And sometimes it goes into la-la land for a little while and is not even in the work queue or anything. And I don't know exactly how it got stored. I don't know any of that. I just don't remember anything about this particular situation. So,
if Paxlovid had gone through that process and got rejected, we would still have seen the fill history, right? There would have been data entry.
oh, it would have been.
Because once it's entered, then go through the DUR. I mean, before it even gets to insurance rejection, it would have had to have gone through all that process.
I'm not sure.
Somebody's user ID would have been tied to it.
Right.
I have no clue how it got stored.
What do you recall about John Taylor's shift that day?
Well, he was the pharmacist that was there when I got there, and I do know he stayed late, and I'm speculating about how late he stayed because I didn't look at my watch whenever he left. But I do know I was appreciative of him staying late because we were very busy that day and we had a lot of shots going on, and he just he just stayed. So I didn't ask him to or anything, but he stayed. So I was glad that he did. So.
I guess what's the normal procedure there if 2 prescriptions or 3 prescriptions are called in for a patient, e-prescribed? I'm sure y'all put them under the same name, but what's the process when one doesn't go through for whatever reason? Maybe it was reject, maybe you were out of stock. What's the normal type of process of what y'all should be doing so someone alerts the patient?
Well, if I knew that there was a reject, we'd be working on it. If we knew there was a prescription for that person, you know, we'd be working on it at that time. But since I didn't know there was that prescription and I don't even remember this situation. I'm speculating. I mean, I know that what I say when people say, can I get it filled? You know, now I'll say, yes, you know, pull around or come in. I don't know if that was him or somebody else that day, because I'm sure I said that several times that day. But I just, I don't know. I just know that if we knew of the prescription, we would have been, you know, expediting it and getting it, you know, taken care of. So.
One more thing I'd like to point out to y'all about the complaint. The complainant says that all I received was the I can't say that either, Ashley. Fluticasone. Flonase. Neither the pharmacist or the technician told me they didn't fill the entire order. I contacted my doctor the next day and learned that I did not receive the Paxlovid, which to me indicates that the patient wasn't even really sure what they were picking up. And, you know, whatever counseling did or did not happen with whoever it was that did it, I'm not sure that that would have changed anything if the patient didn't know what they were getting. But you know, we're not trying to throw anybody under the bus here. I mean, you guys have seen it a million times too. This has been almost a year ago to not really have a specific recollection of exactly what happened. I mean, I think she does have a recollection of John staying late because it was busy and she.
Well, because he called me 2 weeks after. So I remember thinking through that day, you know, what happened that day. But even at that point, I didn't remember anything about a Paxlovid prescription, you know, coming through.
I think the other thing to keep in mind here is that the allegation of the complainant is that the pharmacist was smirking. I think in order to accept that as being true, you would have to believe that Dr. Boylan here, who's been a pharmacist for how long?
Since 1990.
Since 1990, would deliberately not fill the Paxlovid prescription and then laugh at the patient who didn't know it. I mean, I don't think that that holds water. I mean, frankly.
Convoluted on both sides. It sounds like the pharmacy is closed, and yet they try to stick around and take care. I had figured out to I'll report that tripped a certain lever for our staff, and that's.
And I'm going to add that the prescription was filled on 7/12 of 2022, it looks like.
So a month later?
A couple of weeks, 3 weeks. Yeah, it was 6/24.
6/24. The complaint came in on 7/12, and I sent that off to the store. I asked for a statement from the pharmacist that filled, verified, and counseled the patient on the prescription, if different from the PIC. I will tell you the only statement I received was from the PIC. He did send us a statement. It is in the packet. I don't remember seeing a statement from Leslie or from the other pharmacists. And basically they just said, neither pharmacist remember what went on that day. And without any information from the 2 that were there, we as staff went with the information that we had, and the records that we were provided. And as Brad said, the record on the pharmacy inspection report doesn't necessarily indicate that that was the pharmacist that was there. It indicates that somebody was signed in on that login at that, during that time. We had, like I said, we had a phone call with Dr. Boylan. We were told that he left about 5:30. This happened after that. So with the information that we had, that's why we brought her in today.
And the phone call was Dr. Boylan calling Dr. Kirtley, I think, right before Ms. G got involved, asking about the process. And basically it was opening question, what happened? And it's consistent in the fact that she said, I really don't remember, but she did say that the other pharmacist left at 5:30, which corroborates what the patient says. It corroborates what the records show without relying on speculation or memory loss. It was our contention after looking at this that the records as a whole support the allegation that was made by the patient in this case.
Could I take us to, I think, 3 points that aren't disputed by anybody? One, that the fluticasone prescription was a new prescription. Number two, that nobody canceled on that prescription. And number three, that the Paxlovid was not filled. That everybody agrees with that, right? There's no dispute as to that, those three things.
I believe that's right.
Okay, then the place we have dispute is with regard to if a pharmacist didn't cancel or a particular pharmacist didn't fill the Paxlovid, we've got a dispute as to who potentially did that.
Yes, sir.
And we've got conflicting evidence with regard to which physician did or didn't do it.
Yes.
Now, does that fairly sum up what the board has to decide?
I believe that's correct.
I mean, I would just add that the evidence that the board staff has is actually the documents presented to us from Walgreens. So
There are two documents that indicate that the pharmacist who was responsible for the other prescription was not Dr. Boylan. The documents that don't support that are the payroll records, which indicate that he left at 5 o'clock and he didn't sign the logbook at all that day, which we know that's not correct because we know he was there.
Okay, so with regard to the decision the board has to make, we can either decide that one pharmacist or the other pharmacist failed to counsel and failed to fill, or we could decide that we have insufficient evidence that any one of them did, or I suppose we could decide that since there's insufficient evidence on that, that from an informal, non-punitive action standpoint, that both pharmacists would be. And I guess the other question I have along that same line is, if that's the case, isn't the place that, say we don't have sufficient evidence to pick which pharmacist did it, we know that Walgreens did it. And we know Walgreens is responsible for what their either pharmacist did or didn't do. So or should we not, if that's the case, be looking at whether to take informal, non-punitive corrective action against Walgreens instead of the one or the other or both of the two pharmacists?
today you have in front of you Leslie Boylan. So she's the party today. I mean, depending on the board's decision, yes, we could bring in Walgreens in general, or we can bring the other pharmacist. In discussing this case, we thought the evidence reflected that Dr. Boylan was responsible, and we didn't feel like we had enough evidence to bring in the other pharmacist. So that's why we have who we have in front of you today. But yes, all those would be options in the future, obviously, if the board sees fit.
I'll say with one exception, and especially understanding that our new council is newer, there have been a time or two where the board got to this and said, you know, since it's informal, here's how we would like to resolve this. And you throw out an offer. And if it involved Walgreens or both pharmacists or warning letters that are not punitive, but are just hey, look, we're giving you a warning notice. You could ask to do that as well. Because being informal, it's not necessarily that every single person is noticed, but it's whatever the board seeks to offer, almost like mediation to resolve an issue.
Well, if we wanted to take an action that was non-punitive, that did not single out one pharmacist specifically on the basis that we maybe don't have enough evidence to.
Or there's
single
enough
out
confusion
one.
around it, yeah.
But we have a problem that something happened that shouldn't have happened, that we'd like to see some steps be taken to show that it doesn't happen again. What options do we have?
I think you could give a warning notice to whomever, whether that be business entity or pharmacist, with a request for a corrective action plan. And basically, if they gave a corrective action plan along whatever guidelines that it could resolve it, and at that point you would dismiss the charges. It's non-punitive at that point.
I would just like to say, I mean, on behalf of poor Dr. Taylor, who's not here, if you do decide that some sort of action is appropriate with Dr. Taylor or with Walgreens, who is not charged here, I think, they would appreciate the opportunity to speak for themselves with regard to the case. If that's something that you guys thought was the right direction to go.
Well, I think we should be able to find out, and just from this pharmacist that is here today, what is a typical process working at any Walgreens location? How should it happen if, for whatever reason, a prescription doesn't get filled with the other one? I'm sure they have a standard SOP and follow that probably every day, all day long. So if we knew where the downfall could have happened, it may help us. I mean, they don't just not fill it just because they don't want to fill it that day. So something had to happen. What's a normal way two prescriptions get together or not together?
I guess if there is I'm just saying, if there's something that happened in between those two prescriptions coming in and something got interrupted, then maybe they wouldn't get filled together, if it got really busy. But other than that, I would, that's, I guess it's whenever the techs, most of the time it's the tech that puts it in, but just whenever they get a chance to put another one in, but if we would have known that was there, we would have filled that. I don't know how it got stored. I know the pharmacist would not just store it without talking to the patient and letting them know either we don't have it or, can we call around for you and find it somewhere else? But it wouldn't just be stored without talking to them about it. So that would be the normal.
And you're calling stored as put on hold?
Right,
Okay.
right. Yeah.
Well, and I think when they come in on e-script, could the tech be filling them totally separate of each other and they go in two bags, but wouldn't that come up when they were filled? So if one was filled and the second one wouldn't, regardless of what or why, how do y'all find out? How do you know
So
to
in the
talk to
work queue, like what prescriptions are available for them to pick up and what are ready for them. So we would check the work queue to see what was in there for them and if it's not all in the same bag, we would know, oh, there's 3 more prescriptions.
But how do you know as the pharmacist to tell that patient that you don't have something in stock if one was filled and one wasn't? Because you don't know when you go out there to for them to pick it up that you have one on hold. You had to have known earlier in the process.
Right,
We're
yeah.
just trying to figure out
If
where's
we
the
would have
missing step.
known about it, we would have told them, we don't have that in stock, or, can we call and see if we could find it for you? And they can pull it to the other store if they've got it at the 24/7 one or whatever, But it's not just, it's not just stored without talking to them about it.
There's got to be a process of how you know about it. I'm
How
trying to
you know
figure.
about if it's
yes.
stored or,
Well, can a tech just go put it on hold, and not even tell you, or
Yeah.
normally does a tech put it on hold and then tell you that, hey, there's one, I mean, what's the process?
they were not supposed to do that. But it can happen sometimes where they just, because they're putting them in, and if it's a rejection, they might just put it on hold, and that's not supposed to be the case. But, you know, that could happen.
So if a prescription comes in, but is put on hold, I mean, they still have to process the data. It's not like they're actually just attaching a prescription and sticking it in virtual history. I mean, you still have to actually enter the prescription data in and then put it on hold.
Right.
So would that not
Yes.
create some sort of trail somewhere?
I would think so.
So it would seem we've got one prescription that we don't have anything on. And so from a due process standpoint, you can't, there's nothing to point to any pharmacist, you or JCT. Pharmacies are in the business of filling pharmacies, or filling prescriptions, but pharmacies don't fill prescriptions, pharmacists do. So I'm not sure what regulation we would hold the pharmacy.
Yeah, I mean,
Into. And then to finish the second thought is the prescription that was filled, we don't have the right pharmacist here in front of us, regardless of what the timestamp and whether it means Eastern Standard Time or Central Day or whatever, that we have the wrong pharmacist here. And so I don't know that we can really take any action on that.
Well, we know this pharmacist was there when it was dispensed. We are not sure that the other pharmacist was there when it was dispensed.
well, and
I
to be safe, I mean, we're not sure of anything in here because it's got JCT's initials, it's got the wrong time. I mean, you wouldn't have.
But what I'm saying is the trouble that we struggle with is even discussing staff, like we don't know exactly when the other pharmacist left. We know what the payment stub says versus the absence. Like there's a whole warning letter issue that, and let me clarify something about warning letters. Any of the staff can issue a warning letter. That's not an action even necessarily of the board. Like I can issue if I'm in the field, or Dr. Fain or Dr. Robertson could issue that as a warning letter and a request for corrective action. That happens all the time, but it's not disciplinary. We can't tell for sure exactly what time they left, other than some documents say it was earlier, some documents say it was later, but we know that she was on duty. I cannot say that anyone alerted her to this person's here. It's a new prescription. You need to counsel. And I know she's busy. I can't say she was drug away from anything, but the direction we've been given in the past is patient complaint, new prescription, failure to counsel, bring them before the board. And maybe you guys want to revisit that, but that's why we're here. And this is a confusing issue.
And I'm going to say that unless I misunderstood, the fact that JCT's initials on that inspection report page, the fact that they're on there doesn't mean he was the one that was there when this happened. That's just, he was the pharmacist of record because he was logged into the system that day. It doesn't mean he was still at the pharmacy when all of this took place. Is that correct?
My understanding is that
Doesn't mean he wasn't
not
either.
correct unless he didn't log out when he left.
I mean, it's all erroneous as far as all, I mean, the time, I mean, you have the tech at the window that's trying to close up. The pharmacist in the back obviously wasn't consulted before they said that. They said, oh, we're fixing to close because they're thinking about going home. Then the pharmacist says, oh, hold up, we can do this. So then the tech goes, and I guess I'm assuming the tech went in there and filled it under JCT's initials, but God only knows. I mean, you don't know if JCT was there, not there. I mean, nothing in here. It's not illegal to not fill Paxlovid.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong there. Everything, only thing I can see is, okay, so the patient wasn't counseled. But they were offered counseling. Because all that we have is that they denied counseling. And and the only saving grace in the whole thing is you had somebody who is suspected of having COVID, not tested positive for COVID, but just preventatively. And then, but God bless them for not going in the store, because oftentimes they'll just come right in the store, come right up to you without a mask or anything.
Well, I would disagree with you on one point, that it's not illegal, or that it's not illegal to not fill a prescription, but it falls below the standard of care to not fill a prescription when a prescription is being transmitted and the patient shows up to pick up their medication. But I think that what is clear is that we have created, as we've talked about all these different issues, we can't say what happened.
Right.
And so I don't know that for anybody that there would be due process, because there's nothing against this lady that she did anything was even involved other than her name's on the complaint. From the timing, we can't be certain that the person of record, even though it says consultation document completed by and consultant accepted no. But if there's some question about if it just walks away and accidentally leaves his initials on the computer, I mean, that's not a safety protocol, but it doesn't mean that this person, that we can definitively assign it to them. And I'm not sure how we can hold the pharmacy itself responsible for something that is a pharmacist action. I think all we can ask for is
Their policy.
fortunately, there was no patient harm, or at least I've not heard of any. And that we just ask for well, I think it would be fair to ask for some sort of summary. What do you think happened and how could you prevent this from happening again? Give it to us in written documentation and move on.
But
Go ahead.
work it every day. Yesterday, people call looking for their prescriptions before they arrive. You will fill a batch of prescriptions for someone, and later in the day, another script or two will come through. There's like no correlation with the time, so people are gone. And sometimes people are from out of town coming through, because we're at like a little crossroads there where I work. And you have to call people back and say, hey, your antibiotic just came through, and they've been gone for an hour.
Yeah, a lot of variables.
So it's so many strange things that happen with these prescriptions these days. And what y'all didn't do, y'all didn't bring a copy of the Paxlovid prescription. Is there a copy of that anywhere?
There is.
Okay, what page is it on? And then what's the timestamp on it?
There's not a timestamp on it, and
Okay.
there's not a timestamp because the Dickinson has a timestamp because we put into the system, their system printed it out. But when you go to the Paxlovid prescription, it just shows that it was an electronic prescription printout cannot be used. It doesn't really show any time of when it came in or anything that I can see.
Page is that?
Exhibit, but to go on hold, they do have to enter it.
It has to,
You have to enter.
you have to enter it to be on hold.
So to me,
I
it's
can
like-
show you the paper one. I don't know what page it's on.
I've got it right here.
Does it have a date on it? Because sometimes
They were both the same day.
get stuff the next day if it closes.
They were both the same day.
Same day? Okay.
Yes.
It's unfortunate,
Mhm.
but it's not.
It's this thing that does it.
Well, I really believe they have a policy of how things should be conducted. How should this be? Don't do anything anyway.
On page 20, the Paxlovid prescription's on page 25 of your pamphlet, of your tablet. So without the audit information from Walgreens, we don't know when it was entered or put on hold or anything.
Oh, so this doesn't give complete information then?
But as you said, the patient didn't express patient harm other than he wasn't counseled, he didn't get his medication. I
Yeah,
don't
and I
know
don't
whether he
think
got his
anybody was
medication the
laughing
next
because
day.
they didn't give.
I'm sorry.
Ashley, I'm sorry I didn't show you. That's just the packet you sent me.
Not a concern.
And I've
So-
got another point. Go ahead.
I had a question, I guess a comment. I feel like, so this, I'm looking still at this last page of the document, like page 218. And it's got consultation accepted, and I guess you can hit yes or no in the system. And I feel like this isn't specific to Walgreens. I feel like there's a lot of other systems that have this. What's the purpose of that? Because if the law is you shall counsel, what's driven so many software manufacturers to have this yes or no on whether consultation? I feel like we have more of a global issue.
Not all scripts are new though. So not all prescriptions require counseling, but many companies will use that as a notation to show that there was a patient interaction for insurance purposes.
But many
Insurance
companies,
purposes,
many
okay.
companies have their software flags a new prescription as requiring counseling.
Yeah.
I've gone to a pharmacy before and I've got a new prescription and I've got refills and they say, here's your refills. The pharmacist will be right here to counsel you on this one. And I'll say, well, I'm a pharmacist, and say, that's okay. They have to counsel you anyway.
Yeah.
Well, but the software, these are used across states, and some states are offer states and some states are.
Right, that's, I figured that had something to do with it. I didn't know about the insurance part though.
Typically, they'll, or something like that would build it. They would have tweaks for certain
Yeah.
states. So they should have the tweak in Arkansas where every new prescription, don't ask them, you just.
And I guess that's, I guess, Dr. Mack, thank you. I think that's my point is, I think there's a misconception even in the state because of these big softwares that maybe you, as long as you offer it, even if they refuse, that you're covered. And so I don't know how to fix that. I'm just saying, I think sometimes it may be a misunderstanding of what's required. Just haven't seen these a few times. I don't know if we need to educate people or they need to update their systems based on the state that they're in, but I think it contributes to the issue of patients not getting counseled when they're supposed to per our regs.
So would it be substandard of care or not right for a pharmacist, let's say, for instance, if they had filled the Paxlovid, but the patient refused counseling? Would you deny giving them the Paxlovid?
He wouldn't have complained. We wouldn't know.
That's right.
So,
I mean, that's
true.
and I will tell you this, and I don't know when this was changed. I know that Walgreens came before the board one time and they agreed to put a hard stop on all new prescriptions so that the pharmacist had to go over and scan their badge when it was a new prescription for counseling. Is that not being done anymore? So somebody had to scan a badge? There's no way to tell who scanned the badge on that?
I think that's what it was showing, but I'm not sure.
The consultation documentation.
I don't have the fact, he said, I didn't know I was gonna have to testify.
Yes.
You know, I don't know that that was ever approved for them to do away with that, and I hadn't heard it mentioned, so
We
I didn't
scan our
know if you
badges
still had
and
to scan the
everything.
badges.
I don't know if you heard him. He's saying that consultation documentation completed by, that's the badge scan.
so it does have to be the pharmacist to scan their badge in it now.
So which pharmacist?
And does the-
JC Taylor.
Well, then, if that's at point of sale, that would mean it was JC Taylor. So it couldn't be a technician that checked that off on somebody else's computer.
Right.
I'm learning more every minute.
I'll make the motion, we take no action. Dismiss this case.
For the motion to take no action and dismiss, we got a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Unless you guys want to argue about that.
Ask that the pharmacists not leave their badges by the cash register when they go home at night, so they can scan that.
We don't.
Okay.
No, that's too fancy.
Totally unrelated to this case, but I would like for us to entertain at some point that this is a big enough issue. We have continued to hear this from meeting to meeting to meeting, whether it's formal or informal, is that I would like to see us require every pharmacist during the next biennial session renewal to have completed a CE program that is offered on requirement to counsel on prescriptions in the state of Arkansas. We could get it accredited.
To require it, we would have to change the rule to have it as a laid out requirement.
And who are you
Okay.
requiring?
Well, otherwise, we're just gonna keep doing this one by one until we get every pharmacist, or we can just require it all at one time, and we've got 2 years to do it.
I mean, it's something that I can continue to put in our law review. We're not doing a law review at association meeting, but we can put it in with our lectures for the students. We can put it in with our other lecture we do for law review to have it on there.
I'm just thinking that if we require it one time for every pharmacist, at least at that point in time, and then we continue to make sure that it's being taught in law class at both schools and whatnot.
Couldn't we just, change the CE requirement? Do that, change the CE requirement for one, something.
You could, I mean, let me see how to phrase this correctly. Please do not underestimate the amount of work and rigor it takes to change a rule, first of all, but it's, if you direct me to come up with language for that, I'm going to come up with language, present it to the Department of Health, to present it to the governor's office, to then tell us if we can continue with it. And then it goes through the normal other paperwork process.
I would just advocate that we give some thought. I'm not
Absolutely.
making a motion or anything today that we go and do that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that we need to give some thought on how we can, in a broad way, address this problem.
So just throwing this out there too. Because I don't, my comments are not meant as like want to be punitive on anybody. I really think there's a misunderstanding on some people's part. So could you not just could we send a letter just saying the board continues to see this and just handle it that way rather than a CE and just clarify it some way like that?
Send it to every pharmacist, not just PSEs, but every pharmacist.
Or permit holders. I don't know what.
Well,
miss people.
it's the pharmacist who does or doesn't provide the counseling, whether they're permit holder or not.
Yeah.
I mean, we definitely tell them that it's something you have to know for the law exam. And I know Dr. Fain and Dr. Holland and I all, and I'm sure Dr. McCready all have it in our lectures.
Can you send a letter to every pharmacy without?
We could send a letter or a email notification as a reminder to all pharmacists licensed by us. That's not a rule change.
So I used to get those yellow. I know we don't do it.
But we
anymore.
could do one and put it in there.
But I would read them like front to cover and I would see some communication like that at times. And I'm not making a motion. I'm just.
Dr. Cross said he's gonna have a break. Break. Make it a quick one.
Good. Great.
Quick break. Yeah, it's got your notes too. You might like 3 minutes.
Yes.
We can do the orientation. She's sure on her way.
Yes. All right, we'll call it to order. All right,
Counselor, if you want to introduce who you've got with you.
Certainly, I have Dr. Cindy Jackson here with me today.
Dr. Jackson, I know we've met. I'm John Kirtley with the Board of Pharmacy, and I think you're familiar with the informal process, and you've just seen this madness for the last couple of hours as well. So I would start, do you have any questions about how the process works or why you're here today?
I don't.
Okay. Most important thing for you, once again, is, we consider this to be a pretty open conversation. At the end of it, the board members will come up with some suggestion for action that you can either agree or disagree with. If you need some time to talk to your counsel or to ask us a question or anything, by all means, stop us and please do so.
Okay.
With that, I will punt over to Dr. McCready, gives a quick overview of why we're here. And then I think the board members want to talk to you. Or I'm sorry, Ms. Bales.
All right, this matters on Dr. Cindy Jackson, who was a pharmacist at Walgreens. The board received a complaint from a patient, let's see, J. Let me get the initials. HJ. Yes, HJ, that she presented her prescription for atenolol, was presented to Walgreens. In addition to her prescription, she received a prescription of zolpidem, that actually belonged to another patient. Patient HJ took her prescription and she took the prescription that was in her bag that belonged to another patient. And as a result of her ingesting the zolpidem, then she was admitted into the emergency room with heart palpitations. I think this one is less disputed than the other case we just had. It's a board staff's contention that Dr. Jackson failed to ensure the validity of the prescriptions that were dispensed, the products dispensed to patient HJ.
And just as an addition, the patient that filed the complaint did only take 2 of the zolpidem tablets that were the zolpidem 10 milligram tablet.
And you have in front of you the records on that and the actual prescription bottles that were dispensed are under exhibit sticker 11 and 13. Yeah.
It sounds like the patient didn't necessarily lick the bottle, but just took their daily dose and were not getting their atenolol and were instead getting zolpidem.
it's in the same Walgreens, is it?
No.
Yeah.
Doesn't hurt to ask.
That's someone else's name.
Somebody else's name on that actual bottle.
I don't remember it happening, but since my name was on it, it's me that's responsible for it. And the only thing that I can think of is that I was doing the zolpidem, making sure that was what was in the bottle, put the cap back on it, set it to the side, waiting for a medication guide to go in with it. And that takes a few seconds for that to happen. And in the process, I grabbed the next one, started it, and apparently put them both in the same bag, with just the label for the atenolol, which I've been a pharmacist long enough that I know that mistakes cannot happen in the pharmacy. So I try really hard not to. And with losing sleep over this for several nights, I've tried to come up with different ways that I can change what I do. Number one is I slow down. Number two, I leave one patient's product, leaflet, everything in that bin and set it aside until the med guide comes out. and then work on the next patient. I don't ever want it to happen again. I've done CEs on medication errors since then, done 4 hours of those. I've tried to find some more, but I haven't been successful yet. I'm still searching. The other thing I do is when I do the final staple for the leaflet on the bag, I feel the bag just to make sure there's only one bottle in it. And if there's 2, I can usually fill the 2. If it's more than 2, I take them back out of the bag and check it again. I've tried to think of anything I can do to prevent that ever happening again. That I know that mistakes can kill people, and I don't want to do that.
For clarification, this is the same Walgreens.
As the last case.
It is.
Yeah, it's Walgreens 7284.
Oh, yeah. You
And I wasn't the pharmacy manager at the time.
Yeah.
So, because in May of 2022, I'd been the pharmacy manager at that location for 16 years. And I stepped down because I felt like I needed to concentrate on being a pharmacist and not a manager. And so I've been doing the floating for a little over a year now. In April of this year, I went to semi-retirement. I'm just working on a part-time basis at different Walgreens.
So it probably says it in here, but was atenolol a refill and zolpidem would have been a new one? I know for another patient, but
Atenolol is definitely a refill.
that wouldn't have been counseled. But if zolpidem was supposed to be counseled.
But it did
Didn't
not.
have the leaflet.
Yeah, it didn't have the leaflet on the outside of the bag. It sounds to me like you were getting ready to do the atenolol and somehow the zolpidem got stuck in the bag with the atenolol leaflet outside.
Right.
And so at point of sale, it would not indicate counseling. It just had the wrong bottle in the bag. And patient goes home and opens a bottle and sees a little white tablet that looks pretty similar to the other and started taking. It was a bagging error, not a failure to counsel issue.
Of course, we would be reasonable to expect the patient to be care to the extent that they don't take the other medication for the doctor's name. And if you're expecting one bottle and you've got 2, but that doesn't preclude the pharmacy and the pharmacist having process to make sure that you only dispense what one.
Did they get 2 bottles or?
That's my question.
And it
They got
sounds
their
like
bottle
they just
and the zolpidem
pulled
bottle.
the first one out and started taking it.
I don't know, because I haven't talked to the patient.
Yeah.
Therefore, you already accepted.
Yes.
Well, and I
Which I
want
think
to
is
reassure you
important.
of something. There's a whole bunch of pharmacists in this room, and I don't know that any of them would tell you that they've never made a mistake.
I've
And
told
I mean,
people
I
for
know I can
years.
remember some that I did, and it's just one of those, how you respond and learn from it that's important in moving forward.
I was gonna ask if your clerks that ring people up, if they do that same check of to fill the bag for how many bottles should be in there versus how many are.
Since I'm now a floater,
Oh, okay.
I don't have control over what the text standard procedure is. I can only do what, like, some of the pharmacies, if they've got a tech there that's saying, do you have any questions on this? When it's a new prescription, I know it's a new prescription. I tell them up front, if it's a new prescription, I'm going to talk to them, whether they say yes or no. So in that case, I can fill the bottles, but in this case, it was a refill, so they wouldn't have asked me.
Right.
Well, I think I may be wrong in this, but somewhere in there, people have to start taking some responsibility for themselves when they're taking pills out of a bottle without their name. I mean, they shouldn't be there at all, and I get that. But there's some responsibility shared. They didn't,
Well, and we haven't researched, are they visually impaired, what their reading level or ability is or anything else? I mean, we have no idea, but I don't disagree that patients have a certain amount of corresponding responsibility before they start ingesting that. But, I've had patients, you have too, that, man, they weren't capable.
They're not responsible for quality assurance or other expenses.
So.
Do I understand that from a board perspective, what we're concerned with here is the wrong medication going to the patient and not a technical HIPAA violation? I don't think we have anything to do with HIPAA violations.
They've already addressed the HIPAA violation
A
side
report
of
on
the
that.
disclosure. And, in this instance, when I would venture to say, understanding that this is a public meeting, we have seen very purposeful disclosures of medical history, which is an absolute violation, not just of HIPAA, but of our rules. And then we've seen accidental disclosures, which have not, are not the same thing. It's, you have to keep it in confidence. If you purposefully tell someone something you're not supposed to, that's one thing. If you accidentally dropped a piece of trash and had somebody's name on it, that's a different issue, or you accidentally dispense it. So they've already taken care of the federal side of that.
Any other comments, questions?
Well, I think we have two issues. We also have pharmacy is happened, he's not tied to that pharmacy. Considering that we've had two cases. Not a case in this one, but still, I think that what we have done in the past is we've asked for a plan of action. How are you going to correct this problem? So since he's not the pharmacist responsible for that store, we're still considering that area that involves that store. I think it would certainly be fine for us to direct. I see you a permit holder. Somebody has to submit to us a plan of action.
So
I don't think I have enough information to go after the pharmacy, but it does bring, some caution signals because it's two in the same day and both of them are med errors and things like counseling or whatever would have helped in those cases, but it doesn't sound like that the routine really lent to having the time to do that. And I may be wrong, but I don't know if we've got enough evidence on the pharmacy itself. You'd have to explain it to me a little bit more, but.
Well, she made the error, but she made the error within the system of the pharmacy itself. And now we've seen two cases back to back in less than an hour that involve the same pharmacy. So it's not unreasonable to expect a plan of correction.
He's asking for information, not doling out punishment.
No, I get it.
So,
Yeah, I
it's-
know. I'm just saying, I don't know how to do that unless we go back in and inspect them again.
You just ask them for information. Y'all do it all the time.
They give it right a plan of correction and put it in writing to the board.
my thought after hearing this pharmacist too is I don't know why that did that. She immediately went back and figured out what she could do differently. So there may be a little bit of a error in Walgreens plan of steps, because if this thing that you said that you needed doesn't come for a few more seconds, they probably have it in their policy. What do you do with that prescription if you're not going to finish that prescription until you get all the paperwork? Her working on two patients at one time is probably covered in a policy if I had to guess, but I think when a pharmacist walks in and says, my name was attached, I must have done it, then we're good.
In addition to her annual, her biannual amount, we've done that before.
Yeah.
Well, recent cases, we've required 10 hours. already begun to do in her own mind. What could I have done differently? Be in coordination with PIC to come up with a plan of correction.
I have some disagreement with that. I don't think you need continuing education to know that you don't put somebody else's medication in the sack with another person's. I don't think that helps. I think that may help in some situations get the person's attention and show them how serious it is, and they need to be more serious in the future. But I see that this incident has her attention. And I don't know that any amount of continued education is going to help in that regard. This is a simple thing.
Well, this happened to be a case where the medication errors occur from a lot. Lots of different places they can occur. It just so happened that this one happened here. Yes, we don't require continued education.
No, I'm talking about with regard to this particular situation. I don't think, other than to get a pharmacist's attention, I don't see that in this situation, continuing education is going to do any good at all. She's not more likely to commit another medication error because she put a bottle in the wrong sack. But that's just my view on that from a.
Well, we'll have to agree to disagree on that.
That's fine.
Was there anything wrong with accepting the CE that she's already done? Because this is the error any of us could make. I mean, you're working every day, you get, the phone is ringing, your texts are talking to you, customers are talking to you, so. And if it happened at that area, it could have been wrong bottle put with the wrong leaflet even. So many things could have happened that you could assign blame to, but it's hard to assign blame to this. Other than they were accidentally mixed together.
Well, let's hypothetically make a change. Let's assume that instead of heart palpitations, she goes out and sleep drives and gets in a motor vehicle accident, has a head-on collision. You're still going to feel the same way. What if we change the drug from zolpidem to Coumadin?
Thank God that didn't happen.
Yeah, I think Rodney's just asking
Yeah.
if we're going to be consistent with a non-punitive method to deal with med errors, and I say this to other people, he always says it needs to be meaningful, and it's not even so much as it is a punishment, but it's a day of CE versus a day of salary for a lot of people is a more educational thing to ensure other issues in the future. And we don't, we haven't traditionally said, hey, you've never been here before, so you get 2 hours. You've been here once before, you get 10 hours. Third time you get 20. Like we haven't really done that because each situation is independent in and of itself. But if you do whatever number of hours the board finds, you're going to get a variety of stuff that might help take off other rough edges elsewhere.
And I think there's different levels of, when I think of med errors, I kind of put them in three different categories. Negligent behavior, which you're doing something that's risky, but you go ahead and do it anyway. And then at-risk behavior, where maybe you modify what your company's policies are as a workaround, and then just slips. And I tend to put this more in the slip. I think there's maybe a little bit of a touch of at-risk behavior to it, just if you were working on 2 patients at one time. But it sounds like you've acknowledged that. But I feel like this was more of a slip. And I agree that it's hard to apply like a standard approach to this, because I do think we've seen med errors where there was a heavy dose of at-risk behavior that maybe requires a different approach. And so just my opinion, I would be okay with accepting the CE that she's already done, and her explanation of how she's changed her personal workflow within the work environment.
I'm good either way. I don't have a really strong opinion one way or another on accepting it or asking for more CE. I'm good either way.
Well, I see this one as a little different than a normal, put the wrong pills in there. Right. I think it was more of a process issue than a prescription error. It turned into a prescription error, but I mean, I don't think it was where you circumvented the system and put the wrong pills in there and didn't scan it, that kind of thing. So it seems a little different, even though it resulted in the same thing.
And I would just point out, don't overlook the fact that patient harm came.
Right. I mean, I don't see a problem with asking a pharmacist to do 10 hours of CE because it's education. There isn't anything wrong with getting education.
Well, let's grab a motion, see what kind of votes we have, and if we have it, then we'll roll with it. If not, we'll renegotiate.
I can put it in form of a motion, and if anybody wants to vote
There
against
you
it,
go.
then that's fine.
What you got? Give it to me.
I'm not gonna.
Just get a clarifying question before you put a motion. Are you saying 10 in addition to or 10 out of the total?
Like her,
But for
he's
her
saying
2
her
year,
4 would already count, but he's
Sure.
asking her for 10 additional in addition to her overall 30 in a bank.
okay, I wasn't
That-
clear.
Yeah.
So she's gonna need 40, 10 of which would be.
Would be
Okay.
long med errors and
Thank you.
giving her time to get it, because we understand you can't do it all
Sure,
in a day, literally.
thank you.
All right, you gonna make a motion?
Dr. Jolly.
Oh, well, I'm not gonna vote nay against 10 hours of CE. I was just trying to say, I think there's different levels here. I would have more of an issue with this particular situation, probably being punitive or disciplinary or something more than a CE requirement. But, I agree with Becca. I can go either way. I just was stating my opinion on how I think, based on the facts of this, that I would be okay with what she's done. So.
And I think the motion would, Dr. Richmond would probably make would be non-disciplinary in nature.
Yeah, I'm understanding that. Yeah.
Well, we haven't talked about whether or not this is something you all usually focus on, is whether or not there's a fee for, because I'm perfectly fine. My emphasis is on CE and a corrective plan.
All right, so give me your motion one more time.
Make a motion that we require an additional 6 hours of continuing education specifically related to prevention of medication errors. And that, I don't know who we send this to, but that the pharmacy, perhaps through the pharmacist in charge and the pharmacist involved here, work to give us a written response regarding an assessment of what happened and a corrective plan for medication errors in their store, and that it be non-disciplinary.
All right. So we have a motion for Dr. Jackson to require Dr. Jackson to get 10 additional hours.
Six.
Four plus.
Right, so 10 additional hours on top of the 30 that she needs in biennium, and the 4 that she's already done can count towards this 10, but in the end, she's got to have 40.
Right.
And then she needs to write up a corrective. Say it one more time.
He wants the store to have, basically to do an assessment of how it happened and give a plan of action.
Okay.
How to prevent it in the future. And it could very well be, I would visualize this as we reviewed with the staff the importance of keeping these things separate and paying, extra attention to, if you're checking out or whatever, if there's only one receipt, why are there 2 bottles in the bag? It could be that simple, but it's in a measured approach to review it with staff.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and that coming from the store, Dr. Jackson could participate.
I have one question on that. Since the other one was on counseling, does it need to address that as well?
Well,
You don't work.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Right?
all right, so
Second.
we got a second.
Lenore already seconded it, but we got a third now.
Actually, we got 3 seconds.
Got 3 votes so far.
We got 3 seconds.
2 more and you might make it.
Anybody else want a second while we're at it? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes.
No, I would say I really appreciate you walking in here and accepting it. Was there any ironclad thing that said you didn't know, but you accepted it? You figured out what you can do about
My
it.
initials were on
and
it,
you
so
owned
I
it.
was responsible.
And I didn't appreciate that. And the other, well, he might have, she might have, he, this, that. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
What?
Oh.
This is under Diamond, Winningham, number 11. So if you guys want to tell us who all we are talking to, I'll introduce the board real quick. We can get a 4th chair up if we need it.
No, she decided to be here for support.
Okay.
Okay. Hello, I'm Josh Winningham. I'm a pharmacist with Diamond Pharmacy. Go ahead.
I'm Denise Zahorchak. I'm also a pharmacist with Diamond Pharmacy. Josh is our local consultant here in Arkansas. I'm also licensed in Arkansas, but I work primarily out of Pennsylvania where our pharmacy is located.
And I am Nanette Bowell. I'm the physician at the Ouachita River Correctional Unit. I'm also the site medical director.
So under tab 11, and just to remind the board, and my apologies, first of all, especially since you've never been here, I know we met Denise before, and I think Josh as well. This side of the table are all board members, decision makers. So if you look on our website, these are the board members. Everybody else you see on most of this side of the room are staff and a couple of rotation students that we have. The way that we have generally handled correctional facilities is they are allowed to have a stock med list. And many times those stock meds do not change for years on end. But if there is a request to change them, generally it's a meeting with the board to explain here are the needs of the facility that are specific and why we need to either change amounts or drugs involved. The ones that the board is generally the most how do I say, I want to say anal retentive, but someone probably tell me that's not an appropriate term, but the ones that we have really focused on are things such as controlled substances that are abusable or divertible and chemical restraint issues after years of issues in long-term care facilities, many of the lawsuits we've seen. On page 1, you guys will see there are several that they want to remove from the stock list, and some of it like ammonia inhalants, which are basically OTC anyway for those SNAP kits, are no big deal. The clonazepam, fluphenazine, Levemir, and then there's a couple of others, which trifluoroperazine. But then they want, and Josh, I think you mean hydrocodone when you say hydrocone.
Yeah, I was sending that. There's actually hydrocodone 5/325, not 10/325.
Okay.
That was a typo on my part. I'm sorry.
Okay, and then the morphine Carpuject 10 milligrams. So I'm sure the board is going to want to hear a little bit about why this specific facility would need those, how big the facility is, like how many inmates. This one, because this one has an infirmary, doesn't it?
We actually have a hospital. Yes,
You
sir.
have a full hospital
Yes,
there. Okay. So they'd probably love to hear some details about that. You guys can look at all the other meds on the actual stock list for this, starting on page 3. So those things would be helpful. And then it's a discussion of whether or not it is approvable and what quantities you're looking to supply or have on for supply.
So I guess I'll start with the why. Wachita River Correctional Unit, Special Needs. So it's a unit in Melbourne. Most people don't even know it's there. And we are actually connected to Wachita River Correctional Unit. So there's actually 2 separate units. We are Special Needs. They are Wachita River Correctional. We a unique unit. We're an intake. So we transfer patients from the jail to prisons. We do all the intake processing for that. In addition, we are the male dialysis unit. So we currently have 27 hemodialysis patients that we house in our unit. We have about 2,000 inmates on any given day. The intake process changes the numbers from time to time, but for the most part, about 2,000. There are probably about 800 in the special needs portion of the prison. The hospital is actually a 28-bed barracks. Officer's desk is now the nurse's desk. There are 12 beds that horseshoe the nurses. And then we have what we call an isolation hall or negative pressure rooms, just slightly down the way. When I first started there 11 years ago, the hospital was essentially long-term care, some IV antibiotics. Over the years, we've progressed to IV antibiotics, blood transfusions. We have trachs. We have Pleurax drains, wound vacs, and end of life or a hospice program that we take care of. So let me back up. The hospital, we don't have telemetry. We don't have in-house lab. Our pharmacy comes from out of state. There you generally 2 to 3 RNs, 1 LPN if we're lucky, and a handful of CNAs that rotate through. The hospital takes care of after-hour emergencies. We have a day clinic that sees chronic problems and then any acute sort of sick calls. But after hours, after 4:30, any emergencies, transfer ins, all end up in the hospital. So, and then there's always a physician on call. So what we are looking for now is I have some control over what transfers into us. We have a peer-to-peer from a free world hospital provider into me. So, and we do our best to try to anticipate what comes out. We actually have care manager that follows our patients in the free world, anticipates discharge days so that we can put in medicine requests in a timely manner, anticipate that it's going to be there when the patient shows up. But occasionally we get what we call a fast track. Someone's injured in jail, goes out to a free world hospital and then is transferred to the Department of Corrections to handle the billing and the care of that patient. Sometimes those show up in the middle of the night, on a Saturday evening, on a Monday holiday. And so there's no chance to pre-order meds to anticipate all of this. In addition, the next biggest need are my end-of-life care patients. Frequently, they will come from a free world hospital. I can convince the provider to put a fentanyl patch on them, give them a long-acting injection. They show up. I can get my medicines either from a backup pharmacy, Charity is in a wonderful job with. But sometimes it doesn't happen that way. Sometimes it's end of life, there's on our doorstep and it's Saturday evening and, you know, we ran into a Monday holiday. And so Tuesday is when I anticipate getting a patient-specific medicine to control his pain. So, and I would like to be able to give you a number of how frequently this happens, but it's variable. I had, no use or no end of life care patients for a month, and then we ended up with 6 in a week. So it just kind of comes and goes. The post-op patients, I don't have a problem with. I can manage that. We have Toradol, we have, some Ativan. I can do Tylenol 3s. I can get through that. It's the unexpected or the that I can't anticipate is where I'm actually asking for the stop.
So with your patient population, how much are you actually asking for that you think you actually need? Like on the, if it's hydro 5325, because you're looking at a gap of, a weekend basically for a turnaround on a stock med list. Are you looking for 6? Are you looking for 30?
I can actually maybe answer that for you. So when we're dispensing these from Diamond, we're acting as a wholesaler at that point. So you all know when you fill out your 222 form, you can't request a partial quantity. So the minimum quantity that we would be able to send of the hydrocodone 5325 would be 100 of the unit dose prepackaged.
You're not doing unit dose as a card?
Not Schedule 2s, no. We're not repackaging Schedule 2s.
That's completely, like, that's the first time I've ever heard that in 18 years here. And maybe I just didn't
Not
realize.
for stock, for patient specific,
No,
we
for
repackage,
stock.
but for stock,
I've been in jails where their stock was cards of 30.
of Schedule 2.
Yes.
Okay, because
I-
we are able to repackage, obviously our tramadol and other non-Schedule 2, but up until now, I am not aware. I mean, I could certainly verify that for you. I mean, our fallback is always the unit dose. Obviously, we don't want to send a bottle, but the unit dose packages of 100 is what we typically send for a stock request. And then the same thing with the injection. For the Carpujex, it would be the smallest package that they're available in, which I think is 10, right? Because they're not typically, again, I always thought that was a 222 form issue.
You
with-
can have partial quantities on a 222.
You don't have to do the whole.
Yeah.
Now, the wholesaler, if you're truly a wholesaler, they're not
The
gonna
wholesaler.
break packages, but you guys are a pharmacy or a
We
wholesaler?
also are a wholesaler because of the stock that we dispense in our line of business. We have,
I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm going to stop a conversation to start a different conversation. And that is emergency kit medications for infirmaries and dispensaries are the pharmacy's medications.
correct. This is
On-
not that same scenario.
It is if you want to use a stock list from the Board of Pharmacy.
Okay. The way that we've approached it in the past, and this is just to let you know how we're looking at it. Dr. Vella has DEA coverage for the facility. So because of that, whenever they purchase a control medication from Diamond, at that point, it becomes it's no longer Diamond Pharmacy stock. I mean, I understand what you're saying from like an Omnicell perspective or a
That's-
Pyxis perspective.
That's not how emergency kit medications work for the Board of Pharmacy here. Like if you,
Okay.
under Rule 5, it's not saying that these are the medications that you can sell to a physician or a licensed hospital or anything else. It's, there's a permit at that facility in Josh's name,
Right.
most likely, that allows that facility, just like a long-term care facility, to have emergency stock medications that are actually the property of the pharmacy. It's the way we've always treated. Unless, I mean,
Until it's you.
because yeah, they really, it's probably part of us on the permit because they.
It is the infirmary permit, yes.
So it's an infirmary with us under the institutional permit. You know, because they don't have a full stock. It's not affected by it. The emergency kit list that we have approved previously for all the correctional facilities in Arkansas, it's the pharmacy's drugs on site at the facility. So if the facility has a loss of those stock list drugs, it's the pharmacy's filling out the 106. Otherwise, who fills out?
And if that's the interpretation that the board has, then obviously we have to abide by that. Our interpretation previous to this has been because the facilities have the DEA coverage of the providers at the facility, then we, at that point, we're selling it as a stock transaction, not as an emergency hit transaction. So I understand completely what you're talking about. That changes our approach, because we do have some states that we do have a definite locked emergency kit. But those are facilities or states where we don't necessarily have the DEA coverage, or it's definitely in a locked type of a kit with a different level of access. So.
And it's supposed to be.
Oh, it's definitely locked. I
It's-
mean, I
it's-
don't want to give the impression that it's
Yeah.
not. I'm sorry. I'm talking about, so when I think of an emergency kit, for example, you may think of like a tackle box with, you know, your injectable Benadryl or not lorazepam because it's refrigerated, but you know, 2 or 3 doses of each of that. So when we think, from our perspective, when we think of an emergency kit, it's a very different animal than a stock list that has cards of 30. At that point, we're looking at it as supplying of stock. And especially when it's coming from, we do have a licensed wholesaler. That is who is providing the stock medications. So if it's a prescription stock medication, it's actually not coming from Diamond Pharmacy. It's coming from our wholesaler, which is Diamond Distribution, which is a separate entity from the pharmacy. That way, we're not exceeding the allowable amount of stock that we're shipping. If we go over that threshold, then obviously we're treading in some strange water of not being a pharmacy any longer. So because of that, and because of the nature of what we do, we actually have a licensed wholesaler that is owned and operated by Diamond that is a separate inventory, entirely a separate location. And that's where we send our prescription stock from. And that's where the prescription stock for Arkansas DOC originates.
So in this situation, the hydrocodone and the morphine would not be patient specific, but would just be going to the facility for her to be in charge of.
In the same manner that we already do with other controls that have been on the list since we took over the contract.
So these
years ago.
emergency medications, are any of these in that, or are they in like a box or something?
They're in a locked room.
They're in a lot, or like a, yeah.
It's the most secure drug room that you're going to have
Right.
anywhere in the state.
Well, what I guess what I'm saying is like, I think when we did last time, and it's been a while since I've done long-term care, but don't you have to have instructions with each one of these on how they're supposed to be used when they go to the emergency room to get them?
Well, there has to be an order from a
standing
duly
order.
author, no. No.
Not a standing.
No, it can't be standing. There were years ago where people would have a 3-ring binder and they tell an RN, say, go through what the symptoms are and use this like it's a standing order. And that does not work any longer. There has to be an order from a duly authorized prescriber for whatever it is in order for them to pull drugs out of those emergency kits or those stock meds to treat any. Just like in a hospital, you have to have an order from a prescriber, whatever that prescriber is, to access that medication.
Yeah, but like if I put regular insulin in a box, in a tackle box or whatever, I guess this is the wrong terminology, but there's directions that home has to follow with the administration of that insulin. They just can't go in and say, oh, your sugar's high, let me give you some insulin.
Yes.
So if it's a clonidine, you go in and you say, okay, here's a clonidine, monitor their heart rate and blood pressure before you give them another one.
But they have to have an order up front to access it, to administer it. So yes,
So what I'm asking is on this stuff, is there directions or anything as to how this stuff is supposed to be given?
It would be an order from me.
It
It
would
would
be
be me
me,
calling
whatever
and
the
saying,
order
Mr.
is."
Smith has showed up, he's end of
Right.
life, he needs some morphine, give him 10 of
So
morphine.
none of this is given without your
Correct.
calling
Yes, sir.
to give it.
That's
They're
exactly.
not, they're actually not able to give the order unless the order is entered into their EHR and their EMR system. Because they have to be able to document that order was
No, it's-
given. For that to happen, there has to be an active order on the patient's
It's
profile. So for
pages.
example, the clonidine, they can't just go pull a dose of clonidine unless there's an active order for that patient with directions and the dose of how it's to be given.
Are we talking about the same
39
thing?
to 42. Yes.
Can I ask?
We are.
You are, but it's a different economy of scale when you are dealing with in jails and prisons. So in Dr. McCrady's printing up Rule 4, which is where this falls. Because in Rule 4, you have Class 3 institutional pharmaceutical services permits for correctional facilities. And they either have a dispensary, which the pharmacist has to look at quarterly, or an infirmary, which is what they're going to call a hospital. And there's a few of the Arkansas correctional facilities that have basically their own hospital. They have, Pulaski County Jail, even as a county jail, has an infirmary because they have basically a prison hospital there. They cannot do everything, but they can do a lot in there because there's still patients you have to ship for surgery or whatever, but they can.
So does this facility have a pharmacy permit?
They have a Class 3 institutional pharmaceutical services permit for a correctional facility, Healy as an infirmary.
But you're licensed as a hospital.
No.
No.
We follow the Arkansas Department of Health guidelines, and we are monitored and certified periodically through Arkansas Department of Health.
Do you have an ADH hospital license though?
I don't
think
I
so.
don't think we do.
Like if you had an
Right.
ADH hospital license, then what we would be asked to do most likely would be to give you a full hospital permit. But that would also mean you would have to have a pharmacist on staff with the size of that facility at least 40 hours a week. But you don't have a pharmacist there on staff.
No, sir.
So it is a situation where, and this is historical because this wholesale distributor side of this is new to me. But like I told our student, there's about 10% of what goes on in pharmacy that's new to me, no matter what.
So
they get an order just like a long-term care facility would from the prescriber, and they go to the room of whether you call it stock meds, but it's emergency medications. It is a stock of emergency medications, and they pull it, and then they give the pharmacy what's supposed to happen. The pharmacy a record of these medications were used for those patients. That's what DEA requires.
So if you have a patient there that requires code 1 tab 4, take care of the immediate needs out of your emergency stock. And you guys will ship a patient specific card or whatever their pharmacy of choice is.
Right.
Yes, sir.
We'll ship a patient specific quantity.
That's correct. The stock is intended for short-term emergency use only. So it's a stopgap. And so we can get the medication to them in a patient-specific form.
So I'm so sorry. Who does the medication belong to in the emergency box?
Well, that's what we're talking about.
Right. It's always been our interpretation of the Arkansas regulations that we are selling it to the facility because we're not looking at it as a traditional stock box scenario. Because we have the DEA coverage from the prescriber.
But the facility
Right.
does not have a DEA. So you are
Right.
actually putting her in
That was gonna be
a
my
very precarious
Mine's-
position.
My mic is up dead, but
There you
It's
go.
like-
don't have a
I
DEA
can hear you.
permit for the facility. It's when you say the DEA permit, you're talking about the physician's DEA.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
Mhm. And we've had conversations actually with the prescribers about this. They get monthly reports to show what controlled stock has been shipped to the facility. They, there is some information there, the knowledge of what is coming into their facility. So it's not a completely blinded process.
And don't the legend drug, this is the president. That's the list.
Well, this list
That's what I have a
is
question
more
about.
than, this is unit by unit. So this is a list of all the different units, not just this one.
Well, that's what I was trying to read, but it just kept, looked like it just kept saying something.
That's just, I'm sorry, that's just a template, really. That was just one that we pulled out as a general example. The additions that we're requesting would only be specific for the hospital unit. The other facilities really don't have need to have those medications as stock. There's really no reason.
They have an institution infirmary pharmacy permit, then these legend drugs can be stocked from that drug room into the consultant pharmacy.
And we're getting more copies of this. If you look at the rule 04060003 and you get down to page 40 subsection, I'm gonna mark it and I'll bring it to you. That's where it starts talking about like special floor stock or backup medication to meet the emergency needs of the patient at the correctional facility will be permitted only when specifically outlined in the policies and procedures manual, says what it has to have, and basically it's, we have to approve what the list is.
This just looks like an impressive list of legend drugs.
Ronnie, can I ask a clarifying question though? I'm scrolling through several pages where the header says Cummins Unit, ARCU. Can I just ignore that? You guys
Absolutely.
aren't asking for
No,
any of those drugs.
That list has already been approved before. The only reason I included that was because we took off that list of removal drugs. So I was just giving you the updated list. All the units have the medications removed. Only the special needs units have the addition.
Okay. So on page 16, it says, oh no. That still says Cummins Unit. On page 18, it says Washita Special Needs -AROH.
Correct.
And that's the only drugs y'all have, or you have all these drugs?
They have all the legend drugs the same. The only one that has the additions is the controlled medication list.
That's the morphine, Carpugex, and the Norco
And the Norco 5,
5325.
that is the only
For the
two
hospital
additions
unit,
for that,
correct.
this one specific unit.
And so page 18, which I feel like we have two copies of in our handout that appear to be the same list. But this list that starts with Tylenol with codeine and ends with Tramadol, that's just you saying this is our new updated list, removing the ammonia inhalants and all the other things. This is your new list, and then you're requesting in addition to that, the morphine and the hydrocodone.
Correct.
I'm just trying to level set on what the request is here today.
Right,
'Cause there's
correct.
Lots of pages in here.
Yes,
so
sir.
now
Yeah,
I'm
I
clear.
just included everything so you would have the new list to compare to the old one, but the summary is we removed the several from all the list, and then only the special needs unit has the two controlled substances in question added.
That whole list is.
No.
Or the special need,
That one thing.
Oh,
that
yeah.
one page. There is another.
That's the current list. That's the current approved stock list. So the only additions that we are requesting for any of the facilities would be just for the special needs unit, just with the addition of the hydrocodone and the injectable morphine.
But you've got to have a non-controlled drug list too, right, for the special needs
There,
unit?
it should be included in
It's,
that.
the Cummins unit is the same thing. That, I apologize, that's a bad example. The Cummins unit, that is just the list that is the same for all of the facilities that have the infirmary permits, including the special needs units.
So a whole list that ends in sterile water for injection and starts with Tylenol. That's your non-controlled drug list. And I know y'all did some removals. But that's your current non-controlled drug list for the special needs unit.
Yes,
Yes.
it's the same as all the others. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a quick question and then I need to do some scrolling and I may have another. It's on page 20 and it's sideways, so if I turn it, it moves, but.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look at it like this. It says hydrocodone / APAP 5325 tablets UD, which typically stands for unit dose, but you're saying
Right.
this is not unit dose, this is a 100 count bottle.
No, it would be a 100 count unit dose.
Okay.
Yes.
But I think you're wanting to ship it. It comes usually 10 by 10,
Mhm.
right? So
Yes.
a cart of 10 of them for a total of 100. And I think you weren't saying a loose bottle, like 100 count.
No,
You were
I was
saying a
saying that the
full package of
manufacturer's
unit dose.
prepackaged box that has the unit dose tablets contained within.
I think there may be a bigger issue of them interpreting the rule one way and maybe the rule is another way or vice versa.
We'll have to work on that.
So it seems to me like we need to get on the same page.
Are you referring to who's got responsibility for it regarding the DEA?
And how it's distributed, whether it's, I mean, because we don't approve wholesalers to have emergency kits. And I understand that wholesalers have a different ability to ship even to a physician, but I'm not sure that a physician has the authority to just have a stockroom of drugs according to their DEA in a facility like that. But I think that, we can fix a misunderstanding with that and get it straightened out. I think the main thing is the board okay with their requested addition of the 10, is it hydromorphone and the 100 count bottle of hydrocodone? Or not bottle.
I have a couple more
Pack.
questions.
What are you?
When you're talking about emergency.
Plus 2,000 people. How many people is in that specialty unit?
We can house 2,000, but generally, I mean, for that specific need, I mean, the hospital holds max 30 patients. So, and it was, so I'm
is a
looking
lot.
for three days at most. I'm sorry. No, just the hospital. It only has 30 beds. Yes, sir. And this is about 1,000 total. Yes. So we have, yeah.
We also have emergencies like within the unit that have to come to the hospital that don't just include those 30 patients that live in. Like if we have a patient in part of the barracks that it's smashed, he has to go to the hospital for an emergency at night or on the weekend.
But may not be at that facility normally.
You'll be at our facility.
Okay.
So if you look, I think if you're looking sideways, just FYI, I think if you go up one page, it's the exact same list, just not sideways.
It's not,
You see some differences there.
the morphine and the hydrocodone are added to page 20. They're not on
Yeah,
page
they're not.
19.
Right.
And also the clonazepam 2 milligram has been removed.
Okay.
The address on your DEA permit, the address of the facility to which is being shipped. Okay, that's good.
That's helpful.
So I am familiar with the nightmare that is keeping dual permits, dual inventory, real fun. But I believe that DEA operates off of like a 5% rule for pharmacies to where you can actually dispense pursuant to a medication order that's not patient specific, you can dispense a controlled substance to another registrant, so as long as it doesn't exceed 5% of your total distributions of controlled substances for the year. Would a smaller quantity dispensed from your pharmacy as part of an actual e-kit, would that put you over the 5%?
Oh, no,
No.
it wouldn't, because that's specifically why we have our separate entity within the company, because we would definitely have been over the 5%, again, just with the nature of what we do as our business. I don't claim to be the expert on what we can accept as an order and where we can ship it from. I think that should be okay, but I would have to verify that.
But-
I don't want to say yes.
Emergency kits are not wholesale distribution because
Right,
it's.
that's
so
what I'm saying. It
that-
wouldn't come from the wholesaler. It would come if we from dispense the stock pharmacy. from the
And it
pharmacy.
doesn't count the 5% because it's the pharmacy's drugs. It's not a wholesale transaction at all.
Right.
The pharmacy is supposed to get an order from the facility of why that emergency drug was used before the pharmacy can even replenish it.
And you can do a 222 form from a pharmacy to another pharmacy.
Correct.
Sure.
So I wanted to ask if that was a potential option, because then I want to look at the rest of the board and say if they,
Pharmacy doesn't have a DEA permit in the infirmary.
Right. In this situation, we would not be selling to another
That's-
pharmacy. We would be selling it to the
Yeah,
permit holder.
They're trying to piggyback that they have a pharmacy infirmary permit with us that does not have authority to individually possess controlled substances unless it is patient specific or part of an emergency kit that belongs to a pharmacy. So at some point in time, this company worked out a workaround where they go, we're just going to give the controls to the pharmacy, but we're going to say they belong to the doctor with a DEA number. I've never, if this happens in other states, I've just never seen. it.
Well, to me, an emergency is really light.
You got to have it right then.
But if I cut my hand, I also have to go to a hospital. The hospital also has to write me a prescription that I have to go get filled. Emergencies don't mean that you have to take care of my case.
Well, except I would argue
In-house,
that
maybe.
there are a couple of groups of people with a constitutional right to their health care, and one of those is people that are incarcerated. So they have to be able to take care of them, or if they cannot, they have to get guards with them to take them to another facility that is not in a correctional facility, which is a much larger risk and burden for care. Where this gets weird is, and it's an argument that oftentimes, just like reciprocity, the board asks, or I'll ask, how do you do emergency services for your institutionalized patients? If they have enough medication on site for the emergency kit to last them for a week, then it's much easier for a pharmacy to not have to send stuff as quickly or to use a backup. So, and this is the argument the board has had for years, is this about convenience or is this about emergency care? From the convenience side, it's easier not to have as many direct shipments because it's not just a first dose issue in some instances. It's a first dose and a 14th dose over 3 days, depending on how many doses the patient needs. And I would imagine there are times when the emergency kit is used for full care for a brief period of time rather than a first dose or starter dose or emergency, because the pharmacy has an obligation to have availability of whatever is required at that facility within just a few hours, not days, not overnight, but hours because of their 24-hour requirement. It could work that way.
I'm sorry, I don't, tell me your name again, Doc.
Minute vowel.
Are you there all the time?
No.
I'm not 24/7. No, I'm not there 24/7. Yes, sir.
No, I didn't say it. How often are you there?
I work
40-hour work week. So yeah,
There, nowhere else.
correct. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And then you have call all the time.
Yes.
I think I just want it to be said that I don't have any issue at all with the request to have these medications. I think the quantities are higher than what I'm used to seeing, well, especially on the hydrocodone, and the morphine doesn't
Yeah.
terribly bother me at all. And so I don't want you to think that we are questioning at all the need for this. But we're trying to figure out how to make it work for you. And so I just wanted to be clear that we're not questioning at all your professional judgment on what you feel like your patients need. For what that's worth.
I would have a suggestion, because I think that
Yes,
your
please.
thoughts are very similar to mine. The 100, because I think any of us that have worked in community pharmacy know that you can have a 222 form on a partial, but that's not actually the issue here.
Right.
I think the issue is we're going to have to, from a staff side and seeking some industry guidance and probably some from Department of Corrections even, figure out, is everybody on the same page with how this is going? Because it's not the way that our rules are written. And so I think that you could say the board says this is approvable and assigned to the staff, that we have to figure out either fixing it the way we think it should work or finding out that this is a feasible way with everything else.
Yeah.
But if you're not comfortable with 100, tell me what the acceptable number would be. Because I'd probably say more like 40 or 50.
50 is what I was thinking. So you guys are Diamond Pharmacy, you're in Pennsylvania, but
That's correct.
do you have a pharmacy in Arkansas?
They cover the correctional facilities.
No, they have they have Josh, who is here local,
Pharmacist, like a
is a
consultant.
pharmacist, because as a consultant, he is going into the infirmaries at least monthly to check records.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure how that works when it's a wholesale record under a doctor's DEA. And then in the other facilities that are called dispensaries, they don't have a hospital or an infirmary unit on there. He has to go in quarterly.
But we don't have a physical location
Now,
in the
that
state of
was-
Arkansas.
just
That's what you're
to clarify.
asking.
Okay, thank you.
Indiana, Pennsylvania, yes. Mhm.
So, I mean, what do y'all want to do? St. John's.
John just
Yeah,
did it.
yeah,
I
it's a
think
great
they
album.
need to work through the whole policy and procedure and see if it's probably just morphed into something different than granted years ago. For
Yeah,
obvious
if
reasons.
there is a different intent to what we're doing, I am very open to, we can change whatever systems we need to change. This is what we inherited as a pharmacy. And so I apologize if this was intended to be an emergency kit instead of what we view as just purely a stock situation, because this is what we came into. And so we have just continued with that procedure. So for me, the addition of these medications is really, I understand what you're saying about your concerns with the quantities, and I agree, and I'll see what we can do about that. But just the overall concept of how they were used, I didn't view it any differently than I did any other control that we've already been keeping at the facilities since 2017, I believe, whenever Diamond stepped in. They were already there at that time. So I thought that this was the process that the board was comfortable with, and we have proceeded with it as such. So if we need to revisit that, going forward, then we can certainly do that. I've just been going based with what like I said, what was happening when we took over and what we've continued to do since.
If the previous people were shipping all that on 222s, it's a announcement to me.
No, I don't think 222s would have been involved because they didn't have any Schedule 2 as stock. It was, everything was a 3 through 5 that is on the approved stock list. So I don't think 222s came into play.
But we thought it's emergency.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think it's just really, we're splitting hairs in what we're considering an emergency kit versus stock. I mean, we look at that a little bit differently because different DOCs handle it very differently. So I think what I think of what we treat an emergency kit is a very small contained lock situation versus what we have within the DOC here at the
But the
moment.
ownership of those two, who owns those drugs? is different.
No.
Yeah, because the pharmacy still has what's in the emergency kit.
No, well, and what what my understanding has always been, even with these, it's the pharmacy drugs. It's an upscale.
Until they get them out.
Until it goes to a patient, at
Correct.
which point it has to have an order to report a prescription for replenishment. The difference here is it's much larger. It's a room, not a tackle box. And we have allowed you to send a card at a time to replenish. If it gets down to 3 or 4, you send another card because it's to treat 1,000 people or 2,000 people, not 75 people.
So do they have an emergency kit at the other facility? Or this emergency list at the other facility?
Our facilities that have infirmaries have the same stock list, but we would not be adding the hydrocodone or morphine to them because they don't have the same level of acuity that they're treating that Dr. Val has at the hospital.
Like one of them has a dental clinic, and so they use a lot more ibuprofen.
Sure. Right.
Or Toradol.
So, okay. We're talking about letting staff go back and rework this
Well,
regulation, like
No.
that's gonna take a hot minute
No.
and I don't want.
rework, making sure that the situation,
Meets the law.
helping them to be sure that the situation matches what the actual rule requires. Because I've got to dig now. I've never heard of a wholesaler aspect trying to supply stock meds, because that's not allowed to supply an emergency kit as a wholesaler. You have to be a pharmacist.
So I would say, just as a suggestion, that we allow them to add their drugs at whatever quantity y'all think. But all of that is in lieu to him looking at the situation and making sure that it's.
Straighten out the
I
procedure,
think they get it straight first, and if.
and then we can approve the drugs.
We do that too.
We're gonna make them come back.
No.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
good.
Just said, right?
If we can't straighten out the situation, I'm not going to approve it. So,
We'll approve it once they get on
Okay,
the same page, but they gotta get on the same page.
all right, give us a motion.
It's more than one. Okay, I'll make a motion that act with the rule and work with them to figure out exactly how the process should be working. They're amenable to changing anything they need and once that is all out,
like the 50 hydros and the 10 carpy
Yeah. The authority.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second. Is there any more discussion on this? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? It passes. Thank you.
We'll be in touch on that part.
Okay, no, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. Okay, my, little pad here is now on low power mode. So I've been- It's tired.
It's
It's
tired.
been going all day. I put it to low. So hopefully, it'll hold on.
Brenda, did our next one get postponed? Okay. I think we've got some more.
That was it. Well, this is still going up at the low power. It may last.
I got 13%. But I closed my thing, so now I don't know where my stuff
Down,
is.
'cause it was like the brightness was cranked all the way up.
Yeah, I just tell them I'm busy. They'll be looking for
I
folks,
know that.
they'll be looking for folks to work next time you talk.
Well, we should have done it. March.
Hey,
We from the bottom.
Oh, you
Or
were
hit
doing it
the,
too?
file manager.
Hit Adobe top.
Dun, 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 dun. Thank y'all for your patience.
You're welcome.
I think.
right, we ready?
I think so. We're grabbing Dr. McCready. So if you guys want to tell us who all you are, I'll tell you real quick who you're talking to today also.
I'm Priscilla Campbell. I'm a pharmacy consultant.
Jenny Hoare, I'm the manager of the consultant pharmacist in Arkansas for Omnicare.
I'm Alan Pittman. I'm the pharmacist in charge at Omnicare Little Rock.
All right, so I am John Kirtley. I'm the director of the Board of Pharmacy. And to kind of let you know who all you're talking to, this entire side of the table, these 8 people are the members of the Board of Pharmacy itself. And then I'm here on staff. Ms. Bell's our legal counsel and Dr. McCready is our assistant director. I believe that we are here today because you guys have a request to be able to use some Omnicell type technology in long-term care facilities that you serve in the state of Arkansas. We have only had a couple of pieces of like automated dispensing cabinets that are have been approved previously for that. And I'll ask a clarifying question up front. Are you guys wanting to use this for emergency kits or for individual stock med or individual patient meds?
Emergency kit.
So it's basically just using this as your emergency kit instead of a tackle box
Yep.
entity. In your connection to this, any meds that are accessed or controlled by the local pharmacy, not a pharmacy out of state. Is that correct?
Correct. They're all.
No
controlled.
out of state. Yeah.
No out of state.
No out of
state.
Because we don't allow that
Yes.
Right. No.
cross border. Same size as normal emergency kit? No, you're not asking for an expanded emergency kit or anything like that?
Oh, no, is that even an option with?
Is
Not
that an
really.
option?
So here's where it's an option.
That's a different
What the board has said is I can't, it's either, I think it's 70, not 75, but you know, there's a standard look at like 70 patients plus is a different classification of an entity. So for every 70 or 75 patients, if you had 2 wings and it added up to more than 75, we have allowed a second emergency kit to help cover some of those larger facilities. So if it's a home that's 75 beds or less, it's one kit.
Right.
If you've got a 150 bed home, we have allowed a dual set of emergency kits.
What's the bed? count?
Currently, this facility, it's 150 plus. We have multiple e-kits there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're already using it. If it's 150 plus, you probably have 3 wings.
Three, yeah.
Each one has a kit so that you don't run across campus to have to access, oh my gosh, it's over there. You have, but these are smaller kits also.
Yeah.
So the contents of the Omnicell then could contain the quantity equal to those 3 kits?
Well, are you trying to put an Omnicell in one central location?
Yes.
We haven't said it had to be on different wings. I think that's a board issue of whether or not they say so. And I don't know how many of you guys have, I know a couple of you at least have dealt with emergency kits before, but on those larger facilities, generally the manual kits, are they in one spot or are they spread out? Now,
They're spread out.
okay,
There's probably a cost issue with the Omnicell.
but there's an access issue if you centralize it versus, because it's a big campus if it's got 150 beds. How far is it from one kit to the next to the next? 100 yards?
Probably not 100 yards, maybe 50 yards.
Is it a one-level facility?
They're all one level, but there's 2 separate buildings.
There's 2 buildings.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but they're parallel to each other.
I miss, which facility is it?
Covington Court
Okay.
in,
Portsmouth.
Portsmouth, yeah. And when you are loading the kit or loading the Omnicell, explain to us how you're going to prep meds, get them to the facility and how they'll be loaded.
So from my understanding and from reading, of course, we don't have any Omnicells in
Yeah.
Arkansas, obviously. So, just like we do the emergency kits, so everything would be like a foil backing blister pack, unit dose basically for each med, and it would have all the information is prints on each of the, blisters.
So it's got barcode on blister.
Yes.
Okay.
And then those would be loaded, I believe we would load the whole thing, I guess, if we had approval there at the store before we took it out there to set it up initially.
How are you going to reload it when you have used meds?
Well, how do y'all do it in?
So I'm licensed in Florida. I have multiple states I cover, and I'm licensed in Florida and Georgia, and we use these pretty extensively. Depending on the state regulations in Florida, the nursing home can actually reload it. The nurses in Georgia, a pharmacist has to reload it. So we send out a pharmacist to reload the machine whenever it needs to be reloaded, and it's barcoded. So you scan to verify that what you're loading is the correct thing.
So this may sound odd, but if emergency meds are used, you have 72 hours to replenish it. So you're sending a pharmacist there like every 3 days, basically.
If need be, according to state regulations, yes.
I'm going to ask because I don't remember. Dr. McCready, the other ADC dispensing cabinet that we did, it seemed to me that it was it like a securable tray, that the whole tray could be replaced, much like removing a box in and out. So my understanding is the only one, we've only had one set that's really been approved by the board before. It wasn't an Omnicell. But as I recall, and someone may correct me if I misspeak or if they remember otherwise, but it was almost like, here's a tray. The tray is securable until you put it in the machine will let you access it. And so it's much like the current boxes, a driver would go and they'd hand them a tray and put a tray in and you switch the two. The other sealed tray goes back to the facility to have it validated and refilled. And so it was a switch process like that. My understanding with Omnicell, and once again, I know a little bit, but not everything, is it does not have that tray function. So you would be making a request to be able to take partial quantities to basically verify what's in the machine and what is being added to it.
So if I'm understanding correctly, let's say you use 3 Lasix, we need to refill 3 Lasix.
And you got 1 hydrocodone and 2 diazepam.
So the controls are in their own separate little cubicle or box or whatever you want to, let's say I want to get hydrocodone out, I enter that. I have to have an authorization code, 2 nurses are involved. It opens, but only that hydrocodone drawer opens.
It's limited access to single
Yes,
drug entity.
so I wouldn't have access to any other control. Now for the non-controlled, then it's like a tray.
So how do you reload the controls then?
Same way, you go in and you say that you're going to reload it, you enter it into the
Yeah.
machine, the little drawer, you have to verify the account or the
You
account
have to
that's in
verify
there.
the count, you're back
Yeah.
counting.
Yep, always.
But I mean, I think if you have a pharmacist doing that, that's a different level of confidence if that's your request for the board. I think most of the board knows how Omnicell and Pyxis look. We know that there are different issues of down to single drug entity security versus an open drawer of non-controls. And when you have talked about it previously, you wanted it down to kind of single drug entity on the controls for security purposes. You'll have full auditability of who has access and who has access those single drawers on the controls. You see it at the pharmacy. They can also see it at the facility.
Yeah, the difference with this, it's more secure for controls in that with a kit, you can open a kit and you basically have
You've got free access to
anything.
whatever seals you want
Right,
to break
and
and
it's,
take.
They're supposed to request authorization to get into it, but really anybody can just break the seal and get into this. Whereas this, you have to have a username that would be controlled by the pharmacy. So facility would have to say, this nurse is one of our nurses. We put them in. They're able to get in. If there's any kind of discrepancy, you can go back and look who's been in it and figure out easier than if it's a kit.
So on the DEA side, the way they explain to us is and it's supposed to work this way with the tackle box, but we know what happens in the real world.
Right.
But with this electronic system, you'll have the order and be able to say, now it's releasable from the pharmacy since it's your drugs. Instead of it going, they haven't accessed the kit yet because they haven't sent us an order. And then you get your kit and you're like, holy crap, there's stuff missing.
Where did it all go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you see at the pharmacy level what your pharmacist needs to take out there to refill? And then they just drive out there with all these pills in a little, with no label, no nothing, is that?
No, it's labeled because each one is an individual unit of use that will have the drug information and a barcode. Do you scan the barcodes as you load the Omnicell? Yeah, it'd be very similar to, what Dr. Jolly's experience probably is in a hospital dealing with Pyxis. When you're reloading the Pyxis, it's all barcoded.
I've got 115 of them, so I kind of.
Yeah, we don't have to explain anything to you.
Are you guys going 6-drawer, like big one, or you just going like desktop?
So we do have both sizes, and that's kind of what I was wondering too. We could do both options. Our intention was to put a full-size one in there.
I want to ask a question. I know there's a little bit of cost to it.
Mhm.
I'm just asking more, not from a full standpoint. Why not go with lidded pockets for everything, controlled and non-controlled?
I think that's just how Omnicell makes it. It's a good question.
I think they do offer like
Yeah.
lidded for everything, and that's kind of where it's going from a best practice standpoint.
And we are in the process, and I'd have to check and see. We are changing out all of our Omnicells with the older model to the newer model. So I can double check and see if that new model that we're putting in, which would be what we would put into Covington, it may have that. It's just the ones I've seen, the non-controls are a drawer that has Lasix and whatever else.
The nice thing about the liddeds is if you're going to barcode scan on refill, whether it's Tylenol or whether it's hydrocodone, if you have those open pockets, just because I scan the pocket, I can still
Like,
drop it in
right.
one.
Yeah.
Or when the nurses go in, they can pull out a sleeve of 10, take one off, and then accidentally put it in the
Right.
wrong one.
Yeah.
So it's just something to consider.
Yeah, no, I'll double check and see. It's possible that with the new model that each individual thing can only be accessed, but I do know for the controls that you can only get to what you need to get to.
I mean, Omnicell is a system that we're both familiar with and have seen a lot of use of. Whereas the other system that we had a proposal was a
It was a
new
completely
system to
different-
us,
it was completely-
mainly desktop, so we didn't know all the functionality.
So are you got, I may have misheard, but like, say a patient needs something out of the emergency. Can the nurse go get it out before the pharmacy sees the order, or are you saying the pharmacy will have to verify that order first before they can get drug out of the?
They are able to go in if they need to get an emergency dose right away. But the minute those orders hit us and we call it PV1, we review the order and
Reconcile.
Yeah.
It's an immediate.
then it shows up in there. They can go in to pick the patient. It shows in their drug profile. So minus that time period from admission to when we get the orders entered, there's that extra security that a nurse, if they go in, they may not accidentally pick a wrong drug versus an e-kit. They can go in and say they're pulling Levaquin for but really they're pulling it from who knows what. But yeah, it doesn't limit them to waiting on us if they need to get something right away when the patient first, kind of like an e-kit, they'd have access.
I mean, I think this request is using a dispensing cabinet that we actually have more familiarity with and probably confidence in, and knowing that they are willing, because it's not a change in, change out drawer, they're willing to have pharmacists load it. I think staff is fine.
You don't have anything
We're
else?
probably gonna want to come look at it at some point.
Sure.
And it's the new toy.
But if you want to come help stock it too, we can set you up for that.
My look would be, it would get messed up and everybody going, John Curtley came in and messed up our robot.
You need approval from us.
Yes.
We have a motion from Dr. Newsom to approve. Second by Dr. Jolly. Anything else? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
And we will be able to give you a letter basically saying it's approved, our expectations, we're going to see pharmacists stocking it. If we at some point later, you want to revisit that, let us know, but this is still new and weird to us.
Yeah.
And as far as quantity, do we just go with?
I think you could put one in a central location, and I think that, I think we could have an exchange of letters of understanding this facility. Get us, Alan, get us the specific bed size of that facility, because we would understand that the single kit is, and up to this many is available for this many patients. And it may not be that you want a triple quantity, because I know what headache that's going to be for you of people just getting lax and not staying on top of it. But if it's 150 people, I could definitely see you having 2 kits. So.
And we call it optimization. So we do periodically evaluate what they're using and change the par levels based on.
And that's the thing is, it's an up to. I've had people that misunderstand, think I have to put this many in there, and it's same thing of someone can bring in a prescription for 30 pills. If they only want 15, you only have to sell them 15. Like, it can work.
Yeah. And then as we progress, if we have other, because this is part of a chain, I can see the chain saying, well, they really liked it. Can this nursing home have it? Is that a come before the board meeting, or is that a letter submitted?
That's up to the board. I think the first couple you put in, the board's going to want to hear to see what's different, because I understand this is a very large facility. The next thing you know, they're going to be like, hey, we got one with 25 people. We want to put this in. And it's going to be, at some point, there's going to be a break of, we don't know that we can get a pharmacist there. We don't know that we can do it this way. Like, we can be that bad guy in that scenario as much as
we don't want to
we need
overcommit
to.
to that either.
And that's the problem. I mean,
Yeah.
we've had them before. People are like, we want to put 100 of these in. I'm going, I don't know that you understand what putting 100 of anything in really means from your workflow.
Yep.
Because it is going to be a lot more work than kits.
And we do have, we have the current e-kit list with the specified doses. This particular facility would like to add hydrocodone 7.5. Would that be possible?
We would have to have a specific request for that, because they've already got the ability to have some Schedule 2s.
Right.
And what are they wanting to trade for it? Or are they just wanting to add?
They're wanting to add or either take away the 10.
Okay. I've seen a similar request from that before, and the fun thing, or I don't know, the good thing or the bad thing is, if you got a 10, you could give half, but then you have destruction. If you have a 5, you could double up, but then it uses it twice as fast. So I don't know.
APNs there feel like they use the 7.5s a lot. Previously, I've just told them it's not an option, but.
I was just say that's not an option, because they don't want to micromanage minute differences in every kit that they do. It's much easier to have a set type of formulary to deal with from an administrative level. If there is truly a significant patient need that needs to be addressed, generally our board has been more than willing to accept it, but it's an appearance. I mean, like the last facility, they brought their physician in with them to say, here's why I need what I need. So it's not just a, hey, can we do this? It's not a flippant issue.
Okay.
No, the facility's helping pay for the machine too, right? Because they share cost.
So, and that's not my department of the financial side of things.
But it's emergency kit only, which is a little bit different, because it's your protection of your stock versus giving them a med cart to do med passes.
Right. Yeah, correct. Yeah, it's our inventory.
Yeah, sooner or later, someone's going to ask, because they're going to want to use something like this for all patients, at which point you have patient freedom of choice.
Yep.
The facility is going to have to buy it for it to work. I mean, it's going to be a much larger mess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Florida's already tried to go down that road.
If the staff at the nursing home has to waste a controlled substance, are you going to monitor that through this system? Or
wastage is generally going to be a patient med wastage, not an emergency pool wastage, unless it's half of a dose of something.
If the patient would refuse it, that's the only thing I can think of, that they would say they want it and then they refuse it. So then they would waste according to normal Board of Arkansas. Procedures.
Which they have to have
these systems have waste functionality on them too. So I was wondering if y'all were going to utilize
The
that.
option of where they can drop it into a secure, I cabinet, sort of like a part of the Omnicell, like they just slip it in there and then nobody can get to that. And so when we go to take it out, we could waste it.
I don't know about that. I mean, waste in nursing homes, anything that's patient specific is, if it's still in card, it has to go to Department of Health. If it's not in card, it's a partial dose or something. Usually I'd have to give it to somebody else. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all
Thank
very
you.
much.
Appreciate it.
Are we done now? Do you guys get to go?
Maybe.
So we're between you and your dinner, right?
We do have a request. Each year, we have the authority to inspect documentation that we ask the board to reauthorize our staff to perform inspections, investigations, and everything else on behalf of the board.
We are correct.
I so move.
There you go.
Or what?
You're gonna vote on it though, too, Lynn.
On in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, please.
Anything else you need today, Dr. McCready, Ms. Bales? I think I'm good. I think I'm worn out.
That was left over.
That was left over. We'll blame that on the new person.
On the what?
On the new person. You're the new person.
You got a new person?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Back tomorrow at 9.
Thank you.